Welcome to motherfucking Hyperborea. This is Plus Ultra Presents The Grey Lodge, a series within a series entitled Aethyrpunk, Arc 5, Part 1. I'm Jin the Ninja. I host a show called Threshold Saints, which is, we'll call it serial experiments in speculative ontology, although I have recently updated the kind of a show tag phrase on IG. I'm playing with different things, and so I called it a very millennial name, a terminally online indie occult audio e-zine. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how that goes, but I like it. I think it's cool. And we were saying even before we started ROM that if Aeon of the Daughter was a breakcore kind of speculative fiction series, and Welcome to Hyperborea is kind of a lo-fi hip-hop series, Aethyrpunk is definitely a rock and roll series. So I did have Death Heaven playing quite loud when I opened the space because I really like Death Heaven and it's a great album, right? And so so that's the kind of theme, but we're gonna bring it all over. I think tonight we're gonna talk about media, technology. Obviously, Joseph's in the room. Joseph Reed, our we'll call him scholar in residence, McLuhan scholar in residence. Thank you so much, Joseph Reed, for coming. Thank you so much, Rom. Generated this space generated by Rom. Rom is one of our Grey Lodge members. Thank you so much, Rom. Comes to us from across the Pacifica. But really, Asia is really just Hyperborea, right? Like, it's the two in the whole. It's the two halves in the whole. So, interesting. Fluid Flow, thank you so much for coming. We've been mutuals for a very long time, and I appreciate that you take the time to come to the space. Mookie, our Crowface Zucchini from the Lodge, thank you so much for coming. We appreciate you. We see you. We hear you. We invite you in. Of course, this is a speculative Gnostic gospel, so everything we say here is speculative. That means please don't take it literally. So, it is a plus ultra space. We believe magic is real. We're not even going to. We don't even need to make the argument for why magic is real. It just is, and we'll maybe discuss what that is. But in general, uh, that's where we start. And so tonight is Aethyrpunk, obviously. And so, what is Aethyrpunk? And I want to hear what all the boys say, all the hosts say, and I want to hear also what if you have any ideas and you want to come up, or you want to type, or you want to put things in the chat, and you want to discuss like art, architecture, media, technology, any kind of futurism. That's what this series is about. This is Aethyrpunk is really the futurist side of Welcome to Hyperborea. So there's your theme. Have fun. Obviously, I'm the moderator, but I'll let my co-hosts introduce themselves after this last room introduction. So we have Ihaya Sharahaya. I know my Hebrew is horrible. Everybody knows this already, and nobody judges me for it too harshly, at least, or at least to my face. I think they're too scared to say anything, but I'll own it. So I am good like that. So welcome. Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate you. I love Gnostic angels descending from heaven and coming into the mass. That's what it's all about, right? So. Okay, so we have Matt Murrah and, of course, Dr. William Birkin. I will let both of those co-hosts, amazing co-hosts, and we'll also shout out our other two co-hosts who are MIA. Well, we know where Solar is. Solar is having Starlink issues, and Mr. Montgomery Carlo is an erstwhile co-host, but a recent addition to the team because he's obviously been my friend for a long time, or at least 2 years. So thank you, everyone, for coming. And Matt and Joshua, please take it away and give an introduction, plug whatever you want, whatever shows you want to plug, and anything that you're thinking about in terms of Aethyrpunk.
Awesome. I can go very quickly. So first of all, thanks again for Jin for hosting the spaces. Thanks for everyone on the Grey Lodge making it happen, especially this one, Ram, giving the idea. So I'm Matt Mora, Kabbalah, Tarot, Astrology, whatever, magic. I like it all. Give me all. If you like it as well, just make sure to follow me and follow my crazy posts. I also end up creating apps here and there. So sometimes Kabbalah related. So Kabbalah.com. From the way I write, you can look at my bio. KAABALAH.com. So Kabbalah. Slightly different writing. But yeah, I like those crazy things. And I guess I'll let Joshua introduce himself and then we can start on the topic. I think it's easier.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for hosting the space tonight, Jen. And thank you, Matt. And shout out to Solar and Montgomery. Here lately, I haven't done any recordings. It's been a while, but I do have some on the horizon. We'll be doing some Messiah archetype here around Father's Day. That'll be a lot of fun. And then we did mention Idiocracy on the space last week. And incidentally, I'll be doing a movie review on that here sometime soon. So I bet that'll be a lot of fun. A little scary how close it is getting to the plot of that. And, I guess, and to conclude, what is Aethyrpunk to me? Aethyrpunk's like the exact opposite of Idiocracy. It's maybe taking the digital and adding that punk element to it, right? We're resisting the wiles of the New World Order, right? Anyway, thank you very much for hosting.
You are most welcome, Joshua. Thank you for coming, and thank you all to our co-hosts. And yes, Monty, we did shout you out right at the beginning. Oh, Monty dropped. Okay, that's okay. Well, we shouted him out twice, and we saw him, and oh, there he goes. Okay, so we have Monty back. If he wants to come up, I'll request. He is a co-host, official co-host. I don't know if he likes that, but I made him one anyway, and of course he is. And thank you so much, Monty, for coming. So obviously, Aethyrpunk. I agree with you, Joshua. That's what it is. It's cyberpunk, but not dystopian. It's magic punk, but not sword and sorcery. It's like it's magi punk. Yeah, that's what it is. But it's futurist, and it's obviously drawing from solar punk. It's obviously drawing from lunar punk, but it's kind of its own thing. It's maybe the space where magic and technology, not just how our phones are Rahuvian and X is obviously a Ketu like space because it is ephemeral and it doesn't really exist, a smoky body within the black cube matrix, you could say. But this is a little different. This is like a little higher technology and a little higher ideas of magic. And so I was speaking with Toby Chappell, who is I can't remember his exact title. He's like second in he's like the second and most important in the order of trapezoids in the Temple of Set. He's a really interesting guy, honestly. And I was like very fascinated the entire conversation that I had with him. And we also brought up McLuhan Joseph. So I asked him, I said, because his whole thing, he calls it semi-urgy, like semiotics and theurgy, and he compounds the word. That's very Sanskrit, right? Like that's how Sanskrit, and interestingly enough, Bahasa is also a compounding language. But it makes sense because Bahasa is also derived from Sanskrit. But anyways, I digress. He came up with this term, semiurgy, talking about the logos of the word, what connects them. It's obviously emptiness, it's obviously love. Love is the thread, as Monty posted in the chat. In our view, we're not saying temple stuff, but theirs is probably more like will or, self-deification, something more like that. Which is, I'm not saying it's not a goal in and of itself. Of course, yeah, that's a goal. We were John and I were talking today, and what we would call ourselves, like if we had to give it like a kind of Temple of Psychic Youth or Discordian kind of like cool magicians of like the 21st century who are not old Shroom label. What would we call ourselves? And I was like, well, we're kind of Discordian, but we're kind of Dharmic. We talk a lot about the word. We talk a lot about bodhicitta. We talk a lot about love as the cause of knowledge, obviously. And so, anyways, his whole thing was semiurgy. So of course I had to ask him, Joseph, and thinking I thought of you, and I was like, yo, I don't want to like get too in depth here, but I did train under this, or not train, but I studied under this person. And he was like, wow. And I was like, so I'm not a linguist in any capacity, but I am multilingual. So the discussion of linguistics is even for me, even though I say I'm the smartest, and I am the smartest, but not in the world, but in general, I feel like I'm very smart. So I'm just kidding, obviously, partially kidding. It's a little beyond me. It's not my area of specialty, but I do understand semiotics to a degree, and I don't think I sound like total retardsville if I have to ask a question or like engage in a conversation on that topic or on McLuhan's work in general or on communication studies broadly, because semiotics is magic. I remember sitting in a first year semiotics and books and media studies class. You had a famous professor. He said semiotics is magic. Now he's talking more in a chaos magic kind of way, and you can tell that is what his preference was. And in fact, we even read a Peter Carroll book as our part of our undergraduate course thing. So our syllabus. So very interesting class and very interesting professor. So, but they understand it's magic. Now, Toby would say it's more about will. It's more about, you have to really understand your will. And like, that's the axial pivot, the pivot point for all works. So, of course, he's talking about it in a more higher end, kind of obviously more left-hand path framework. And I'm not against that. I'm really not. But I tend to take it more a middle path framework, because I just think you can play both sides. It's okay. But it's important to like be able to reorient yourself. And I know this is something Matt talks a lot about, and I don't want to like speak for him or take his point, but he talks a lot about perspectival relationships with the tree. So he makes it in a Kabbalistic point, like the way he frames it, but you can make this in a Buddhist view as well. Like we call it the view with a capital V, because the orientation to primordial view is what matters, not your positionality. So it's important to be able to have a single point that you orient yourselves around. If that is will, so be it. Okay. If it is something higher, as like I would like to think that we discuss, or we're a group of metamagicians. That's really what the Grey Lodge has become. And so I would like to think we think of magic in a little bit a more higher end way, also a new aeonic way, because where do aeons live? They also live in your consciousness. That's the whole point of doing Aeon of the Daughter, so you're all on this, I'll say we are all on the same page in terms of understanding that it is a speculative gospel, what we did, but it's also like a broader idea of love within the world. And I was speaking with John today, and I said, I'm still 1,001% committed to this idea of Aeon of the Daughter. But I also know that Aeons live in your mind, that the Dakinis are part of you. They're part of your Shakti. They're part of your essence. They're part of... So if we say all that, it just means that we're in a time of even greater decoherence. We were in a time of decoherence when we did the Aeon of the Daughter, of course. But perhaps the Crystal Millennium Kingdom is a little less out of view. Maybe it's a little less within the pink ray right now. But that is okay, because we know it's there. So we just have to orient ourselves to see it. So that's why I wanted to do a futurist series, sort of change it up. Because Welcome to Hyperborea is really the story of America, or the New World as we called it. But Aetherpunk's really the story of what will be. And of course, what will be is what we make of it. We are the builders. I'm not a mason, but it's a great idea. Because the future is what you make of it. Your life is what you make of it often. Of course, there are other factors involved. Yes, Matt, please go ahead.
Yeah, I want to jump in quickly here, because what you mentioned and what is happening on the timeline right now, it's interesting to see, because some people will claim like they understand how the world works, how the universe works, and yada yada, and then they'll get caught up in the most like trash narratives ever. And to me, that shows that they don't really understand how the universe works, because if you comply to a narrative, then you are creating it. So like Jin is saying, we're trying to bring an idea of a future. Like to me, Aetherpunk is very like utopian. It's very like everything went well. It's kind of like what maybe Atlantis used to be before falling, or something like this. Like this magic, kind of using technology the best way, like with nature as well. This kind of, again, very heavenly theme. At least that's what's in my mind. And then when you see that this can be a possibility, but then you subscribe to narratives that don't fit this, like for example, you subscribe to a random person saying, oh, there's gonna be a war, or oh, there's gonna be this and that happening, and so on, so on, like just random narratives that people throw around. They don't even know what's true, because especially nowadays, what can you trust really on the internet? Especially like video, really, like with all the AI stuff you see out there, how can you really trust what's going on and so on? Like text, image. So again, it comes up to the idea that you are the one creating the future, at least your future. And the more that people don't subscribe to, let's call it like, or rather, the more that people subscribe to ideas that they would like to live, the more that those ideas become reality. It's literally, it's as simple as that. It's just like a numbers game. Let's say it's a percentage game. If enough people start changing their mindset around something, their consciousness, then it becomes true. So I think it's a very important job here, or work rather, that we are doing to show this future that can exist, right?
100%. That's what we're doing. That's what Anna of the Daughter was. I felt like it was something that was from beyond me, but I obviously took you like it's not like a spirit. I don't want it to sound like that. You all know I'm anti-spiritualist in that way. But it sort of was like a spark of splendor, you could say. And it manifested, and I was the vehicle through which it wanted to be heard. And so then it became like a co-creative magical working that we all did in synthesis of, transcend time into space, into an actual space on an app called X. And we talked about very, I would say, intermediate to advanced ideas in both Tantra, Kabbalah, and speculative magic. And we synthesized something really interesting. And every time we continue a series, it is also a continuation of that original spark. And so it is what Matt is saying. It wasn't like a psyop. Like I never would do anything to be like I've always said, like you're in consent. Like if you come into our plus ultra spaces, this is magic. Like this is what we're doing. We're routing the lightning for the 2 hours and 22 minutes or 3 hours and 33 minutes that we're here. And hey, Mario from Symbolic Studies, thank you so much for coming and appreciate it so much. This is our speculative, it's our series. We're calling it a series within a series, Aethyrpunk. So it's about utopian futurism, kind of magic and technology in a utopian way. Not necessarily utopian, but maybe in like a punk rock kind of utopia, where it's like a little chaotic, a little freer, but things, as Matt said, things turned out well. But it's also that idea of like that we can make of the future something better. And it's also interesting not to discuss politics or bring up the timeline, because I really think it's important for everyone to have like a respite from that. I'm just going to say, of course, this is a speculative space. Everything I say is speculative. Real or not real, you have to decide for yourself. But I will say, just speaking for myself, the Archons only know how to lie. Of course, that's also your own consciousness at times. Many times, most of the times. But Archons are also other men. So that's the reality. The reality of the rulers, if you want to say it like that. So everything that we're seeing, in my opinion, is a total lie. Total fabrication. Doesn't even look real. The pictures aren't even good. You need true Kino to convince the Kabbalah King. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But true in a way. Kabbalah Prince, okay. So that's how we're going to start this space. But I also think it, like Matt said, it matters. So generate the seed with love, generate the seed with bodhicitta, generate the seed with loving kindness, and it will come into fruition. I really believe that. And I think that this is very Year of the Snake, what we're seeing, right? Like one way to survive a Year of the Snake is to be in constant, perpetual transformation. And I can honestly say, from January to now, I have undergone many transformations of consciousness. And it's been very difficult at times. And we've had a lot of tumult. But, John did say something rather profound to me about the group. And he said, You know, look at all the people that weathered everything that like you went through, Jin, but then also like because part of it was in group stuff. Like you all weathered it together. And you stayed and people love the spaces and they come. Like I'm not saying it's like, you know, we don't get like the thousands. Like we had a couple thousand listen to Anne of the Daughter. We don't get those extreme numbers this time, but we get really good numbers, and it's really impressive that we do this. It's like an audio thing, magical co-creation, and we're doing like a futurist kind of like magic punk theme, Aetherpunk, obviously, and Welcome to Hapaborea, which is obviously like a word I coined that it fucking penetrated Twitter. It's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy. A word I came up with that word when I was 16 years old, and I was like, one day this will be a word. This will legit be a word, and I knew it. And I don't know if that was magic, Matt, but there was something in it, and I said it would happen, and it did. So, and then we made it into a series because I was like, you know, as you all know, I really don't like when I like to credit people. I like that idea of standpoint epistemology, where you say like what source you're citing. I try and do that. I'm not perfect, but you know, I try. Side tangent on that, Joseph did make a really good comment about how McLuhan did not use the word semiotics. No, you're right, Joseph. Of course, you're right, but he did not. But some of his proteges did. So, and of course, it's a lot easier to put things into a university epistemology when you have like a encapsulation, a silo, a klipa, maybe, to put all of the knowledge in. So, you know, I don't think semiotics is the perfect term either. I would much rather call it media studies or something else, but it's important for him because he's just so associated with that, especially in Canada. Yes, Matt, please go ahead.
I just want to point out that that's exactly, to me, what magic is. Like you had something in your mind, really, in the abstract, that you bring into reality. However that may be, like it's a word or a concept that people start using. It can be a tool, it can be whatever, right? It's just something that it's in your mind, that you give it enough light that it comes to reality. That's it. It's as simple as that. All the affirmation girlies, all the manifestation, whatever, all the PNL guys, all the books on self-help and whatever, they're all talking about this, really. Like, how can you bring light in the most coherent way, and that it gets to your life in the way that it's the most approximate, because it's never going to be the same, but it's going to be the most approximate to what you had in mind. So that's the thing. It's not like hard science as well, right? You have many ways of making it work. The tree is flexible. The tree has many layers and so on. So I think that's a cool concept as well. That on, if we're talking about Aetherpunk, right? To me, that there's some movies that bring the idea very well. Like probably, like Lord of the Rings. I think it's a nice movie that maybe not that technological, more in the magic side, but like I still think the overall theme, because it reminds me a lot again of kind of Atlantis kind of things. Also some games like kind of, I think it's called BioShock. I really liked the like overall art style and so on. I think it's very similar as well to what I have in mind, at least from Aetherpunk. And my point is that those concepts of like you having technology kind of merging with nature and kind of merging with the mind and like everything working together. Imagine if nowadays you already have, if you have thoughts and you start talking about it, you start getting ads for things. So in a way, your mind is already kind of connected to the internet, right? But imagine if what you thought, like you could think things out, right? You think, and then Amazon brings you something that you just thought in your home, and then you buy it. So you just start extrapolating what we already have, and you can see how that would work, right? But that's the thing. We don't even necessarily need the technology. The technology is there just as of a kind of a tool to intermediate the things, right? The universe already works like that. The technology is just another way of using the same thing that we already have innate. But again, the more you work with that idea, the better you get at creating it. And then you have something like Jin with a like huge podcast. To me, it's very huge. Like for the things that you talk about, again, it's not, you're not gonna see, you know, a random person on the street even wondering about those things. So if it gets, to me, if it gets more than 100 views, it's already fucking huge, you know. And you get to speak with huge people. So again, you gotta give yourself more props sometimes. But that's the idea. I'm probably like, I cannot say for Jim, but probably when you just started this kind of stuff, you didn't necessarily realize where it could go, right? That's magic. Obviously, we have a goal that we point to whenever we want to start something, but we don't necessarily know where it will go. It can end in like 2 weeks, or it can take a super long time, and it can crash and come back, and like that's the fun of it as well, right? The journey.
Well, you know, Matt, sorry, I'm going to let you go, Joshua. I just want to, first of all, I want to welcome Allison. So, Allison, uh, I think she's great. So, welcome, Allison. Thank you so much. There are multiple people who are coming on the show very soon. Allison's one of them, and Matt's another one, and Joshua's another one. So, yeah, we've got things going. I just didn't want to say because obviously, you know, it is tumultuous astrological time. I've had a lot of reschedules, not cancellations, reschedules. So it's I didn't want to, you know, I didn't want to cross polarities, but I believe that things will come into manifestation that are good. So for me right now, I'm in a good place, and I just want to say that. So welcome, Allison, and thank you so much. Obviously, honorary lodge member, thank you for coming and all the support that you've given throughout the over like I don't know, like 8 months that we've been doing this. Allison's popped in quite a few times, so thank you so much, Allison. And I want to say, Matt, you know, I don't want to give myself too much credit, but I've had a interesting and definitely a wild podcast, quote unquote, air quotes, if JJ was here, air quotes career. So it's been very interesting. Obviously, I've worked with Mario. I don't want to call extensively Mario because I don't want to like be like riding on you, but I have done quite a few episodes with Mario on Rejects. So that was definitely one of the pinnacles. And I'm not just saying that because Mario's in the room. It really was like, I was like, oh, okay, so, okay, got Mario, and then the next one, it's like, yeah, and then you sort of hit these things and you're like, yeah, I do get to speak with really interesting modern American occultists. And that is actually what my whole thing is and what I'm interested in, modern American magic. And that's what this whole space has been about, or this whole, at least, like, not just our Welcome to Hyperborea and not just Aetherpunk, but in general. That's what the Grey Lodge was supposed to be. It was supposed to be like an extension of my, not necessarily my show, but an extension of like social media personality, right? And we were come together in synthesis and discuss modern American magical ideas. Obviously, we're not all American, but it's an interesting kind of synthesis that happens on us on an app called X, which is both the 10 and the 11. So it's magic. And no, so I've been really lucky, honestly. Been really lucky. And I'll say one thing. I'll say one thing in service to myself. I have never, ever, ever asked to go on a show. I've always been asked. So if I don't get booked lately, that's fine. And if I get booked a lot another time, I'll go on those shows, right? If I want to, obviously, if I will. But I usually say yes. I'm not going to kid. I'm not kidding. You can just look up. I go on everything. But no, I'm really lucky. I've been really lucky, and I think I'm good too. I'm not that modest, but I think I'm good, and I think my ideas are really interesting. So, Matt, if you are listening to it and you think this is like higher end knowledge, true knowledge, maybe relative, obviously, but true knowledge as much as it can be, that makes me happy. That's it for me. I didn't do it to like, I'm not a YouTuber. I don't want to be a YouTuber. I'm not good at IG. Ron will tease me and call me an ultron, and that's totally fine. I'll own it for myself. And obviously, then I'm in Matt's. I was in Matt's DMs early morning, being like, Matt, how do I make a video? How do I make a clip? And of course, Matt generously helped me, and it gave me really good advice. And but that's never going to be like who I am. Like, I'm just being honest. I'm too millennial for that. I'm a little too. I care too much about coolness. Like Mario's videos are beautiful, and he never spams them. That's what makes them pristine. That's what makes them really good hermeneutic, because he has like an aesthetic and he follows through, and then that's the video, and it's like an encapsulation of his whole work. So for me, I'm as John pointed out, I have a little too much Saturnian things in my chart, so I require a little longer. It takes me a little longer to get to the point, as some of you know, and I also do a kind of stream of consciousness that is a little complicated. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. So, that's it. So, yeah, so I think I'm cool. I think my show is cool. I think you all are cool for doing this. And I think, yeah, we'll just keep going. And I've really enjoyed it. And so, hey, Sir Tim. Sir Tim is our lodge member, hails from the great state of Hawaii. Really cool. Sir Tim's a great. I actually really like Sir Tim. I wish he would come on my show. I know that I've asked him like 3 times, and he's like, no, but that's okay. I accept. But I would like him to come on one day. So there you go. Okay, so let's get back to Aethyrpunk. I apologize for that digression. Oh, Joshua, I saw your hand. I apologize. I'm so sorry, brother.
It's cool. It actually relates to a few things that you guys were saying anyway, as it always does. But yeah, I noticed your Saturnian part maybe because you do like to start the spaces at like certain times, and you're very time conscious. So I can see that maybe. But the comment earlier about you mentioned Amazon, Matt, and how I was just thinking about this the other day because I used to sword fight for fun, like with some friends, and I didn't have any swords to do it with. So I thought, well, maybe I can find some of those. Went on Amazon, bam. Days later, they show up at my house. So to me, that's magic. I was just thinking, like, if I had somebody from the Renaissance era here with me and living in my house, and I was like, you know what would you like to do? And they tell me, I'm be like, all right. And then in 2 days it shows up. They might even like that. They would kill people. They called those people witches. So anyway, I just want to say like that is very Aethyrpunkish in a sense, as being able to interact over the internet like this and talk. That in essence is using technology and things maybe for not their intended purpose. So that's the punk side of it. I think is like taking something and using it for expression or art or something like that. I never played BioShock, but I would imagine there's some of that maybe going on in that game. But like some of these things are actually constructed to be shackles for us, right? But here we are on them liberating minds, as it were, right? Anyway, thanks.
Thank you, Joshua. No, and I apologize. I definitely overran that last one. But you know what? I think it's interesting because I am becoming more relaxed on mic, and I also think because Rom really came up with the kind of at least the scaffolding, you could say, very Shudra maxing Rom. He came up with the scaffolding that we sort of that Aethyrpunk became, like whatever the series will be. So I did want to bring it back to that, which obviously both of the co-hosts did. Good boys. Thank you. But I was thinking Xenoblade Chronicles. But then also if you think Xenoblade Chronicles, which I know is like a little more Zoomer coded, you have to consider us ultra millennials and also say Final Fantasy. At least 7, 8, 9, and 10. And maybe 10 is the most Aethyrpunk of them all, in fact. And you might ask, why is that? Well, it's about you could say a giant dragon whose name is Sin, sort of a spunky, blonde, bleach, like Japanese guy named Titus, and a beautiful priestess named Yuna. And so it has very Anne of the Daughter elements, obviously. I mean, they know. We know they know. Okay, so there's so much anime that has that kind of theme of like the rectification of son and daughter. But it is, and right, so that it definitely has that element, but it also Aetherpunk in the way that the world is presented, because the world is presented as very samsaric, but not samsaric in the prison planet way. Samsaric in that things can begin and end at any time. The dragon sin can destroy the world at any time. So people don't take things for granted. So there is high technology, and then there is also magic. And the magic comes through the aeons. Isn't that fucking interesting? Anyways, yes, please, Joshua, go ahead.
I didn't realize you knew so much about Final Fantasy. So one little interesting tidbit is that in Final Fantasy VIII, all terrestrial communication had to take place on fiber optics, Ethernet, in other words, Aethernet, because they had the sorceress trapped in orbit. They had her trapped off planet in like a containment chamber, and she created so much interference, kind of like the sun's doing right now, the solar's Starlink. It wouldn't allow for any kind of transmissions to take place. So that's why in the first mission, when you go to that town, you turn on the radio tower and it summons a demon. Like it attracts demons and stuff from the sorcerers, because there's this concept of what's called a lunar cry. Monsters come from the moon or whatever. So like it'll have a period where it gets concentrated and it cries down monsters onto the earth and destroys the earth. Anyway, it reminds me of the flood, because I think the moon used to have water on it. But anyway, but the other thing I forgot to mention earlier with the Amazon thing was we're using pentacles money to do that. So that you're using like the rudiments, right, to achieve this alchemical outcome on the other end. And I never really read any of Tracy Twyman's stuff, but I think she had a book on something like that called, like, what was it? Money Grows on the Tree of Alchemy, or I don't know. I'm probably messing up the name, but anyway, it reminded me of that.
Yes, and I have read that book, and I cannot even remember the title, to be honest. And I went on someone's show and discussed that series, actually. Top secret. Very interesting. So I also think Final Fantasy VIII is a very Aetherpunk series, 100%. And the idea of the monsters coming from the moon, this also replicated, maybe it's an anime trope in certain kinds of anime, obviously, but it is also replicated in Goblin Slayer. So there's two moons, an orange and a green moon, but not the green as, if you've ever been to one of the Kabbalah spaces, you'll know that there are three qualities of green. There's jade, which is more Netzach, Venus oriented. There is an emerald with light passing through. That is Hode oriented. And I'm using oriented, it's not really the right word, but I think there's a correspondence, okay? And then there's also the peridot color, which is a dragon color. Just think of Shenlong. Remember, I quote tweeted what do I call them? I fucking forgot. The Dindu Nephilim Squad. The Dindu Nephilim Squad. So I quote tweeted them because they had a whole episode on like Dragon Ball Z is satanic. And like, obviously that is so low IQ, I can't even with them. Obviously they live up to their name in every way. But anyways, okay, I digress. So it's Shenlong. So if you think of Shenlong, that is a really good colors for Rahu. So it's both orange and green, right? That's really good Rahu colors. And I know that in Jyotish, he's not really the stones necessarily, but yeah, green cat's eye and Hessonite. Hessonite's actually orange, but it looks black. So when you have light passing through, it actually blazes orange. So you can see there's like a Hode-like quality, but maybe it's the lower quality of Hode. That's exactly what the dragon is. He's much closer to our desires. He's the king of the blood ocean. So I forgot where I even was going with that, but okay. Well, anyway, Shenlong,
You started from the Tracy Twyman's book, maybe from that. You're gonna get somewhere.
yes, money magic. Okay, well, I've totally forgot. Sorry, Matt. That's totally my fault. I went on a weave, as Joshua would call it, but um, I forgot my perspective, so I apologize for that. But no, I think there are. Look, as you all know, Vidya is a hermeneutic. Like video games, anime is a hermeneutic. It's just like what fits Aetherpunk, or what is Aetherpunk, because we have to describe it kind of anachronistically, right? Like we have to say, like Aetherpunk didn't exist in 1995 as like a term, a frame, a word, right? So we have to give it logos, we have to give it meaning, and then we also have to like say, okay, this series can be considered a part of that framework. And why not? Because as you all know, I'm a big fan of reasoning. Maybe that is also very Saturnian and Mercurial, which I am both. So yeah, I think that is an interesting way to frame what Aetherpunk is like looking in terms of series. So we brought up several: Final Fantasy VIII. Oh, I remember now. Okay, sorry. Yes, it just took me a second. Had to like hook my needle, I guess. Um, Goblin Slayer. So there's a green and an orange moon. So the goblins come from the green moon. The green moon is particularly desolate, and there's no life on it at all, and except for the goblins. And when they are living on the green moon, the goblins must self cannibalize because they've eaten everything that exists. So the whole point of the Demon King sending them down to Malkuth, if you want to call it that, is that they're sort of like the fifth column. You could say that the fifth column of the monsters. They're sent down to really disrupt human society. And you might think, well, in RPGs, goblins are like the first tier. You're in the starter town, and then you go outside and you kill a goblin. You get 1 or 2 copper, and that go on your way. But in Goblin Slayer, actually, the goblins are very powerful. And later on, we realize in their cosmology that the goblin religion is actually based upon the god of outer knowledge. It's really interesting. Because you could also say the god of outer knowledge is Ganapati or Ganesha. It's one of his names. So, and in a way, the orange and the green correspond very well to him. So he has a Hode-like quality. And what astrological condition does Ganapati clear? Ketu. So, interesting. Okay, yes, Matt, sorry, please go ahead.
I think Joshua was first. If you want to go.
Oh, I didn't have my hand up. It might be glitching.
Oh, sorry. I can go. Yeah, fucking X. But I was gonna say it's interesting that you mentioned the Goblin Slayer one because, like Joshua was mentioning the Earth things, right? So Goblin is very Earth elemental. Like again, the first ones you would probably encounter in Swan, and also like this week, wasn't there something on what's it called, like Gobli Tepke or whatever? Guys found something new or whatever. Maybe I'm tripping, but I think I heard. And so the idea that, again, even on a utopia, let's call it like this, of Aetherpunk, it's not like you don't have things to handle anymore, right? Like you still can have issues. Again, if we take Atlantis as an idea of Aetherpunk, they were quote unquote doing good until they weren't, until they were wiped off. So it's an interesting thing to have in mind as well. Like when you were thinking about utopian things or like the best outcome possible, how can you really do it in a way that you create the conditions for the thing to last longer? Because I think everything is cyclical. So at some point, something will end. Like it's inevitable. You can be immortal in one ways or another, but in general, like if we're talking cycles, they end, right? They tend to end. And trying to make them keep going forever usually corrupts things. So if we're talking about like creating this kind of utopian, perfect, or not necessarily perfect, but like very cool world to live in, how can you think about would it be organized, right? So things can continue to thrive and so on. So we had actually a very interesting discussion in the chat today about this idea of like, okay, but there are like people like using Kabbalah or whatever to control the world and so on. It's like, sure, at some point you can go into that frame of mind that there's someone controlling the world or whatever. But in another way as well, if you think about it, you as a human, when you have to take care of other people or things, you either need severity or like mercy, right? Or both. Actually, you need both. But at some point, if let's say you're taking care of wild animals, usually you're going to need more severity than mercy, right? Because they're wild. They're not in your control, quote unquote. So if we're thinking about this kind of utopian that everyone goes well together, like Aethyrpunk, again, I imagine kind of like nature and tech combined. So you're not necessarily needing tech to be outside of nature, like getting a rock and crafting something out of it, but maybe something like, imagine going to a tree and being able to interact with the tree somehow, kind of this level of technology that I'm talking about. And but like you would need a lot of cohesion between the different let's call it entities living there, right? So I think it's very interesting as well, because then you need to think about frameworks, like how would these people live well together and so on, because everything has to be accounted for, right? Otherwise it's only utopia, it's only on our minds. But if we're talking about implementing something like this, then there's a lot of cool stuff to think about.
So it is interesting what you're saying, Matt, because the level of like what is the political or the meta politics, as Solar would say. So I'm directly quoting Solar by saying meta politics, but credit to him for that, because that's his main sort of focus of interest. And it's also very interesting, I think, to all of us. And I think that it's a worthwhile discussion in like the context to Aethyrpunk, because we're saying like what is the future that we want to see or whatever. Not to use like libtard language, but you know what I mean. I don't know anymore. Like, and it's not that I don't know. I can see where we're strong as like you could say new world sort of order, or a new world, or the hyperspace kingdom, like where we are right now. Like I can see our strengths and I can also see our weaknesses, and so I fluctuate between like that kind of. I think Solar would appreciate this. Like this is like magiocracy, which we probably already have. So I think that also corresponds to like what you were saying, Matt, about how we were discussing in the chat about do Kabbalists rule the world? Like sure, there are sorcerers in control of the world, but like you're a sorcerer just for coming into our consensual magical space. So are the archons really stronger, more powerful, scarier than you? I don't know. I kind of don't think so. That's my personal feeling. So, but I think in an Aethyrpunk way, it is about like fuck you to the archons. And I think what is that? I think it is a rebellious spirit, much like the Nuria, much like burning down the Ark, much like not allowing the truth to, just because you can't see the truth at that moment, that like crystal millennium kingdom, of course, on the moon, just because you can't see it at the moment doesn't mean it's not there. And so you can still orient yourself towards it, right? So you can still burn down the arc of lies if you know approximately, relatively, where the truth is. Okay, Joshua, please go ahead.
More in line here with the Aethyrpunk theme. It was announced during Gemini. You mentioned metapolitics, so I was going to sneak this in here. They, in the United States anyway, have announced the Palantir, now making a digital twin of everybody. Well, they announced this during Gemini, so to me, that's very metapolitics. You don't, and I think there are sorcerers ruling the earth, because that's the type of shit we would do, and so we'd be naive to think otherwise. And it reminds me of that quote, millionaires don't practice astrology, billionaires do, right? And it's the fact is, like, there are mechanics, ways that the universe and world operate, and I think some of these people are aware of those things and they abuse that and keep that knowledge away. So in a way, it's like eating from the tree of knowledge too. There's definitely a technological aspect associated with the tree of knowledge, And I think humans have an interesting relationship with technology because according to the Judeo-Christian theology anyway, we were not originally intended to have it or whatever, or at least until an appointed time. But we eat from it greedily, don't we? So I think that one of the thoughts that have crossed my mind here recently is how to resist in this climate, right? And one of the ideas that I really like that I've been seeing is the concept of, you mentioned rebelliousness, right? Well, if you wear clothing that has adversarial patterns on it, the AI will think that you're a chair or a cat or whatever, anything other than who I am is fine, right? Because otherwise it's adding to the digital twin, right? And so eventually it kind of replaces us in a sense. It's like there were some studies done a while back that showed like how they could predict with pretty high precision, like where people were going to be even 20 hours from now, maybe 2 weeks from now, et cetera, because we really are engaged in a lot of patterns and routines. And excuse me, I think that's why it's also a good idea to do things with your offhand, take a different route home, those sorts of things, because it helps to encourage neuroplasticity, right? And that's the type of thing that novelty is not. AI can't do as much with novelty, right? It can't really put it in a box, right? But anyway, I just wanted to mention that because I'd like to start making clothes or whatever that kind of have, maybe we could put like occult symbols on them or whatever. I don't know. But anyway, I'd like to create some type of camouflage to this digital twin thing, right? It's like the evil twin in the mirror, I guess, right?
Maybe that is the true spirit of Aetherpunk, is like the incorporation of magical symbols with full knowledge, not just playing, not just superficial, not just accidental, full will, full knowledge, full potency, full prayoga into everyday things. It is a psychic aeon. I said it's not, when we did the Aeon of the Daughter so many months ago, I said it's not necessarily a magical aeon, it's a psychic aeon. And I think both of those things correlate deeply. And I think part of it is the difference between them is really psychism is about your own mind, which is also what magic is really about too. But you have to kind of, we've gone the way of supernaturalism. That's how we kind of understand. That's how magic has been understood for the last few hundred years. And I think we can actually, I think there are some interesting ideas. Yes, Laurel Canyon, all of that, of course. But I think there are some interesting ideas that also arise out of that. That is like, your mind's really powerful. There's like something magic. There is something powerful, something psychic about everyone, about our relationship with nature. And like Matt said, and I do want to flesh that out, is that relationship with nature as Aetherpunk. Like it's like the use of technology in a pragmatic way, but also maybe in a way with foreknowledge, will, and intention that you are going to be in coexistence with the space around you, which is occupied by all these other forces. Okay, Matt, please go ahead.
Okay, I actually want to start by saying that Joshua is reading my mind or something, because I actually was talking to my Kabbalah mentor yesterday about doing clothes like with code symbols and shit. It would be actually very, very funny to do something like this. But like Jin said, like purposefully, right? Because the ones I have usually are because I go to metal concerts and they just use it because they probably think it's cool or shit. Maybe some of them know what they're doing, but yeah, most times they're not necessarily. But creating something like this, it's actually very cool, and it doesn't have to be crazy. Like I have, for example, shirt that just has like a small lightning bolt on like the right side, and it has like colors that are very cool as well. So it can be very simple. But as Joshua was also saying, like training the algo to not be able to detect you, not because you just want to be rebellious or whatever, but also because, like he said, you want to create more plasticity in your brain. So not only you can do this with external things like clothing or whatever, but think about your algorithm. You train the algorithm, and then the algorithm train yourself to only watch the same things over and over and over in this kind of, like people like to say, doom scrolling. Like I personally find that I never doom scroll. I always willfully scroll because you can literally find anything there. Like that's the thing. So many problems that I actually solved because I was on Twitter or TikTok or whatever, Instagram, doesn't matter. Because you can actually train it to give you anything that you need. So you like start, for example, by liking posts that you usually wouldn't like, or commenting or whatever, right? Just interact with posts that you usually wouldn't, and then the algorithm starts to wonder, like, what the fuck is this guy doing? Maybe I should show him this thing now and that thing. So it starts like crash out in this way, and it can give you more of what you need. Because if you're constantly trained to only see the same things, you're never getting novelty, right? You're not even going to be interested in getting novelty yourself. So that's something very interesting. And but also another way you can play is the idea of not playing the game, right? If you want to fight something like this, like the current status of the game, you can decide not to play as well. So that's another idea, right? So just by going out. And then one thing I want to mention, though, since we were talking about metapolitics, there's a concept on the archaeometer that didn't forget about it. I'm gonna come back to translating it. It's just that I found a way to make actually use of it, because to cut it short, the archaeometer is this tool that you can use to measure, just like the name says, archaeometer. So you're measuring the arc. So you're measuring, let's say, you want to measure dimension, and you can see how that dimension relates to certain alphabets or to certain tones of music or certain colors or certain astrological signs. It doesn't matter. You map everything together, right? I don't 100% agree with all the correspondences, but the idea is very cool, the concept. And I was thinking about this because they also mentioned in the book this idea of synarchy. So as kind of, instead of one group deciding how to rule a certain region, you'd have multiple groups ruling, like co-ruling, basically. And if you think about it, it kind of works this way nowadays. Like they mention in the book 3 functions, kind of like as an organism. So you would have the nutrition side, which would be like economy. You would be like the activity, the will, the soul side, which is like the relationship between people, like the politics, legislation, and so on. And the third one, kind of like the spirit. So science, religion, all this kind of stuff. Again, very Yud-Hev of He, right? You have like the 4 elements, you can say, water and air together in the soul. But basically, you would have these 3. And well, if you think about it nowadays, you kind of have, people think like politicians rule society, but it's not quite the case, because especially nowadays with tech companies that big, like with military and like a religion, it's always a game that is played together, right? People like to think that indigenous or originary people, whatever, I don't even know how to call, but like people, let's say in Latin America, right, that used to live there before the European came. So they had this concept, right? You had the guy which would take care of religion and the guy which would take care of the warriors, and they would co-rule. So we kind of still have this. Just, we like to say that no, there's just one group of people who think about how to rule. Yeah, okay. But the point being, in some kind of Aethyrpunk environment, I would like to like to like think about this idea of, not necessarily you need a group saying how things should be necessarily, but if everyone kind of gets the idea together, they can create like small, or not even necessarily small, but like they can coexist in groups, right, of people doing these 3 functions in a way. So that's a very interesting idea.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this idea of like what is the political formation of the future. Obviously, I think it's very Aeon of the Daughter. I think it's like a little something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. So whatever that even means anymore, blue not referring to any political party. Just be very clear about that. It's really referring to the pillar of ideas. So particularly Hesed. So let me just say that. So that's what at least that's what I'm referring to. So I think that that's a really interesting like framework maybe. And also I know we weren't going to do too much politics or any maybe, but since we're talking about it in a speculative way, I do think it is interesting because Joshua often discusses it. Hello, Shakti, and welcome our Japanese Zucchini of the Lodge. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate you, and I hope you enjoy it. But I really do think that they are playing out. So this is something that Joshua said a few spaces ago, and it's really profound. And I said something about it last time, and I'm going to say something about it this time. Is that I do actually think that they are living out the Kalki Prana. I think that they like to even Joshua's point about like billionaires and millionaires who does astrology. Well, they all do now because the internet has totally changed the the kind of the informatics, we'll call it, of like the access to information, right? The whole structure, the whole network, like the whole secret society. Like there are no fucking secret societies anymore. Yes, there are still secret texts. There are still secret teachings. I'm not saying that in a theosophical way. I'm just saying in general, there are oral transmissions or different things, right? Because I'm Buddhist, so we believe in all those things. So there are things that you don't speak necessarily into existence, but and definitely people can't just pick up a text and necessarily understand. That's why I've always emphasized for you guys, at least, maybe not in this space or this series even, but when we do the Friday Night Gnostic Mass especially, is that I like the idea, speculatively, that non-dualism and bodhicitta are the keys to understanding all the other systems. So, but how often do you hear that? I've never heard. I don't think I've ever heard that outside of some Kabbalah texts and obviously Buddhism. It's pretty rare. Most of the time, esoterica is treated very differently. The framework. So I think that that's a relative and a primordial truth, what I just said. So I think, yeah, I think that's a great way to discern like what to actually practice in the era of the aeon of availability, you could say. And that also goes to Matt's point about like thinking of something and manifesting it in the world. It's like that is how the world often works already, and it's not like manifestation is perfect. And we've often discussed how it's a very imperfect thing in the way it's taught, but that doesn't mean the concept as a whole is imperfect. It just means that the current practice of it is imperfect. And if you know my opinion on any of this, I believe that a lot of the left hand path material is actually really fucking cool, interesting, and useful, but I don't agree at all, 0%, with how it's been presented. And I also feel that way about the Gnostic Gospels. I also feel that way about esoterica and wisdom science in general, right or left hand path. I think it's presented all wrong. But it doesn't mean that I don't think it's right. I think there's truth. A lot of it. I think a lot of it's very viable. I just think that it requires something new. And maybe that's what this whole Welcome to Hyperborea is. It's like bringing the East non-dualism to Western esoterica. I don't know. That's a very lofty goal, perhaps, for a series, but an interesting one nonetheless. And I think it also ties into the discussion of architecture and art and media. And obviously, we talked about video games, which are very Japanese coded, at least for millennials. I know for the Zoomer kids, it's not quite as J coded, but for us, it is like really Japanese. And like Joshua and I, because Joshua and I are kind of old trends together. So yeah, very Japanesey and anime as well. But I think that's also cool because anime is also very Zoomer. So I think that's what Hyperborea is. It's like the meeting of the worlds and the hermeneutics and kind of like re-engaging with these things that we thought were dead or that didn't produce any fruitfulness because of, obviously, if you take anything in a sicko way, it's going to be sicko. If you take anything in like an overly puritanical way, it's going to be overly puritanical. It's just the reality of the world. So, okay, Joshua, yes, and I apologize. Thank you for waiting.
So what was on my mind right now, hearing you talk, was it was a point I was going to mention earlier, and I remembered it was preservation of media, right? So as we advance in this digital age and knowledge is becoming more abundant, so too, we were talking about movies earlier, even just making kind of references to Lord of the Rings. Well, uh, at some point in the future, that reference will no longer make any sense, right? Because it'll be so far removed. And more especially if at some point the power in charge thinks that it's inappropriate because, well, we don't want people encouraging rising up against Sauron. We don't like that, so we're going to ban the movie now, right? And if it's digital, they can do that. But if you have and many people do, using this particular example, Lord of the Rings is preserved in media in many homes, but how many people have, the Gnostic scriptures and the Nag Hammadi and all these other things, or even just the Torah, right? It's like a lot of these books are worthy of being preserved, and so what is worth preserving? That I think is a good question too. And the whole Aethyrpunk era is, can something weather time, and if it's useful or not. And I think that's one of the values of having fellowship in any kind of group, is especially a group like this, because with so many different philosophies being put into practice, I mean, you can read about something and then you would have to do it. But when you can ask somebody, well, how have you applied this in your life? Or when have you found this useful? And so there could be, like you said, it almost, I imagine it is almost as like there are tools that you can use, right? Maybe I need to get over grief, so this particular philosophy appeals to me. Maybe if I were at the head of a CEO of a company or whatever, maybe being very left-hand path and denying yourself vices and pleasure would ensure that you didn't destroy yourself. So, I think there can be advantages to things like that. But anyway, I just wanted to share those thoughts.
That was really great, Joshua, and I'm going to let Matt go. And it's not because I don't want to speak. I'm sorry that I imbalance it in that way. No, I actually have follow-up for Joshua, but I'm going to let Matt go, and then I'll say something. I'll wait for both. Okay. Sorry, Matt, please go.
No worries. So it's a very interesting prompt that you brought, Joshua. Like, what should we keep, or something like this. Probably butcher your actual question, but the idea, connecting it to Aethyrpunk, is there's usually also this battle between the forces, some of them using either naturally, right, the energy naturally, going with the flow, and some of them trying to extract it only for their own being, disregarding the actual ecosystem, right? So we already talked about also interacting with nature in the sense like technologically, for example. And to me, that it's very connected to the star, right? So in the system that I use, at least, it's the 17th card. So Netza Tuhod, but other people use other systems, that's fine. And it would be related to Mercury as well. So again, you have also the letter, it would be F, or like PH, right? The sound F. And the note, so the musical note Fa, would be related then to the heart chakra. So you connect all this that I just talked about, and you connect the concept of, being ecological, in the sense that you are working with nature, you're nourishing it back instead of just taking, just like you would do with your body, just like you would do with anything else. Really, it's not because you want to play into the narrative that the planet is this or that is happening. It's like not about economics here. It's about, again, if you have a garden, how do you take care of your garden? It's as simple as that. It starts with your home, then you can expand. But if we are talking about what things should we keep, like the Joshua's question, the star also talks about, again, your purpose here, your spiritual purpose. So if you know very well and you have clear in your mind that spiritual purpose, which doesn't have to be fixed, by the way, that's the trick. Like, it doesn't have to be, oh, I am born to do this necessarily. But if you have something in mind, then it's easier to cut out the crap and not do things just for the sake of doing them. And then you come back to the question, right? Like, what things should I keep? What things should matter, and so on? Well, the things that matter to you in your journey, in your purpose. So again, if we're talking Aethyrpunk, then we would probably see that a bunch of stuff that we created in the society right now is just fabrication that doesn't make sense anymore. Like, it's so funny to see. I learned the other day, what was it? One of them was like this thing that they eat in Switzerland, this cheese thing. I forgot the name right now. That basically people eat and they like are so proud, nationalists. Oh, this is a Swiss thing and so on. And then I learned that people only started eating this because I think before the war or something, all the cheese like rot, and the guys made like a huge propaganda effort to make people buy, so they wouldn't go on a loss. And then people just kept going with the propaganda. Like, do people actually need to keep eating this? Well, not necessarily. If it went out tomorrow, it's not like people are gonna die, right? They maybe would, want it for a little bit more, but that's the thing. If you start questioning, why the heck do I do things, or I create things, or I use certain things, then you start to see, oh, wait a second, maybe most of the stuff that I use or do or consume is actually irrelevant for the thing that I actually need to do, right? Coming back to the star, to the spiritual purpose you have here. So to me, that's also very Aethyrpunk, like people connected, at least let's call the good side of it, like people connected to the Aether, like going in with the flow of the environment and so on. And maybe people trying to go against it, but then there's always a conflict, right? You need the conflict for the thing to exist.
Shit, sorry about that, guys. Okay, so I think it's really interesting. I'll just say the point about conflict. I know we said I wasn't going to do politics like 3 times, but I just can't help it. I can't help myself. But it's speculative, right? Totally speculative. So, as I said, I think they're playing out the Kalki Piranha. I think it's perhaps not true Kino, as I like to say, and it's not true Kino, which could also mean it's not real, speculatively, right? And so it could just be a mediatic play of signs and symbols, semiotics for Dr. Joseph. I'm just teasing him, obviously, but yeah, a play of signs and symbols, an actual play, a kind of maybe illuminant play. Maybe that even goes to the idea of the Magi in control, is like, is everything that they do in occulting? No. No. There clearly is not. eh, Most things are not as occult as people believe. Because there's something really interesting. The klipa of Bina is actually occultation. That's how you aggregate Bina. It's through hiding, through secrecy. It's true. I even looked it up in Lurius because I like to look at the OG, the guy who wrote about the Klipa. He's gonna know them like the most foundationally. So, so obviously because on a lot of the left hand path stuff on the Klipa is pretty lame, to be honest. It's very like like it's just kind of like building on demonological ideas of the last 20 years. Like who the fuck cares? That's not what I'm personally interested in. So I want to go a little deeper. So it was Lurius for me. So, but it's a really interesting idea that you think, and then we see like a lot of the truth people will say like, oh, we're like truth. Well, that's very Luciferian, right? So a Luciferian's goal is the de-occultation of all things. It's the epistemological categorization of all things. It's very interesting. And then, of course, magicians are secretive because nobody wants to reveal all their secrets, and no one should. And so, and that's fine. But there's, again, so much information. Almost all the information is out there. So you can all access it. And so maybe that's also what the whole mediatic plays are about. It is about learning to read the system of signs and symbols that the archons or that maybe the world believes in. And maybe subconsciously, because a lot of people don't know, right? A lot of people are, I don't like any pejorative terms, but we'll just casually call them the muggles, right? Because they're not. They're us. They're us too. It's like, just because you know magic's real does not make you smarter, better. Even to have magical experiences does not make you smarter or better than anyone else. It really doesn't. But what it can make you is it can actually make you more aware. Maybe you bring it into Rigpa, bring it into emptiness, and you kind of like exist, and you can say, oh, okay, I can see the polarities, I can see the forces of the world, and maybe I can tame them, but not just tame them externally, but also within yourself. Because, again, the Aeon is about rectification. So Aethyrpunk should also be about rectification. Because that was, if you want to think of things in a Dharmic frame, which you all know I tend to do, the Dharmic frame is that we have to improve our karma right now. You have to do that. That is how to improve the future. But it's also to improve your life. That's what's cool about Tantra. You don't have to. You don't have to. It's not one or the other. But you have to be very careful where you make metaphysical implications. But that's the whole point of what I was saying about emptiness and awareness. Is because you're taking that higher knowledge, and instead of being like, I'm better than everyone, I know more than you, you're a fucking tard, whatever. No, it's really about, you're going to take that, you're going to be like, okay, I had that experience, great, lovely, amazing. What can I learn from it? Well, how can I integrate it, and how can I apply it? That's really what it's for. And so through that, hopefully you get a hermeneutic where you can start to clear skandhas, you can clear cliches, you can overcome them. You can overcome them. I believe that you all can. Anyone listening to this, I believe I can. I'm a very flawed person. I believe that I can. And you have to see yourself through. And I would use Sephirotic language and have many times to describe the exact same thing that I'm describing right now. To penetrate the densities, you must have Diamond Thunder Mind. It's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. It's clear ice with light passing through. It is both the day and the night sky, because the day and the night sky are both what? They're both blue, but blue is also clear in this context. So you could say that the sky itself is non-dual. That's where your consciousness has to be. That's why the sky is the metaphor for non-duality. So that's why water is also a very good metaphor for non-duality, because it can phase in and out of states. Right? Like Nutzok is the diamond, as we always say, but it's also the iceberg, or a huge block of ice, you could say. Hesed is where it's at the melting point, at the ocean. And then, what is Hokmah? It's the fucking water vapor, the steam. Right? That's one way you could think of it. And that's true. That's actually a relatively good articulation of that pillar, the states of water. And you could even say that the red pillar is the states of fire. Because what is Ho? It's a spark. Right? Gevra is the flame. Binah is the kind of like the burning ground, the proving ground, where you have to test your ideas in the flame, but in this case, it's a conceptual flame, right? It's the conceptual flame of true understanding. So you're reading the scroll, whatever it is, maybe it's a Torah, say it's a Torah, by candlelight, and the text is flickering. So it's kind of suggesting that there's a twilight language. That would be true understanding when you're able to read the twilight language. That does not mean there's a secret language necessarily. Obviously, we do have that in Tibetan Buddhism. It's called Dakini language. But I'm not necessarily talking about that. I'm talking more in a metaphorical sense, that there is a space between the words, a logos. And once we understand that there is that in perception, in love, then that begets understanding. So that's why I always say, and not just because I have a lot of Saturnian things in my chart, but I always say, like, Saturn's not your enemy. Yes, is he demiurgic in a way? Sure. Is he archonic in a way? Yes, a little bit. But he's the Lord of Karma. And if you have good karma, you have nothing to fucking fear. If you have bad karma, if you've done bad things, whether in this life or the next, yeah, then Saturn's your adversary, for sure. I can see how people would be scared of him. People who have done bad things. It kind of makes sense, right? Because otherwise you could just interpret it as like a laborer, as like a labor that you have to undertake in this life to like amend something, to rectify something from the past. Yes, Matt, please go ahead.
Just want to give more into the point of what you already talked about, Saturn not being an enemy. It's like, if you see from the tree, Binah, Saturn, gives birth, let's say it this way, so all the other spheres. So really, if you this energy, it's like, without it, you wouldn't even have all the other things. So come on, like, give it some more respect, right? Like, if we see it as the orderly energy, again, you need order, otherwise the universe doesn't exist. Otherwise, things just go far away as far as possible, and you don't add. So you need both. You need the chaos from Chokhmah, things expanding, and you need the contraction from Binah, things coming back together. So it's also the concept of time, right? Chronos and Binah and so on. So it really comes down to, I guess, people, and you talk about this a lot, and I agree, Jin, about like the planets being husks in the material way, right? Like, if we look at the actual materiality of the planets, them being husks. So people take too literally the astrology of things. It's like, not necessarily like that. See it in your body. Again, see in your body, where are the signs, where are the planets, how they rule things, and so on. And you understand that there's nothing to fight. Simple as that. The more you fight, the more you're fighting yourself, actually, and the more again, the less Aethyrpunk you are being. So if you want to be Aethyrpunk, go with the environment. Learn the environment and go with it. That's the idea.
That's such a good point, Matt, and thank you for saying that about what I've called it NASA space Kabbalah, and you're totally right. The planets are the klipas. Klipas are not inherently evil. Of course, I always say this, but you never know who's going to listen back. So I'm just going to repeat myself sometimes. It's not a bit. It's just so people can, have greater understanding of what I actually mean. Yeah, the planets are the physical densities. The Sephira are negative space. So one thing is not alike in this instance. And so the negative space is the aggregation, not necessarily bad, but it's has a materiality to it, a quality of desire, you could say. So we have to understand what those things are. You want to have clear the aggregates. You want to have like diamond thunder consciousness. So you can't do that if if you're aggregated, right? So yeah, so exactly what Matt said. And then it also goes for astrologers who worship the planets. You see this a lot in modern on astro Twitter. People who just worship the planets, like, yes, like, oh, I'm like, even Saturn. Saturn, you see this, like, just as you see people say Saturn is evil, you will also see, like, oh, I love Saturn. And, like, I do this a little too, like, as a joke, but it's not really a joke because, like, I kind of get it, quote unquote, air quote, get it. So for me, it's more okay, I think, to do the joke because it's like, yeah, I recognize Shani as a Deva, no problem. I understand his ontological and cosmological positionality, no problem. But and I respect it. But it's not. He's not the highest. He's not a higher god. He's a minor god, even in the Puranic architecture, right? Like in the Puranic story, he's just a minor deity. The stars are supernal. It's pointless to like worship the planets like that, and they don't even do that in normative Hinduism. As many criticisms as I have of it, as Ram well knows, as Shakti well knows, in normative Buddhism, you do not pray to the planets. Like, it's like you can make offerings to the planets, you can go to the planetary temple, you don't greet them as the primary deity ever. They're actually considered subsidiary of Shiva, or specifically Mahakala. But as I've discussed, you can also say Rahu and Ketu. In Buddhism, that's obviously Vishnu. You can say that he is actually all the planets. The Mahavishnu, not the lesser avatars. I'm talking like Rahula, like from Buddhism, obviously. But he is like the kind of aggregation of all the planets, but he's really also your own desire. It's a big part of him, right? That's a big part of the dragon in general. And I think Solar did a really great definition of Set and what that is and how it appears in both Egyptian sort of and temple, modern contemporary Temple of Set understanding. So I personally think it's more of a Rahu figure because obviously I prefer the Himalayan story, I prefer the Himalayan cosmology, and I prefer the Himalayan system. So that's just me. But so I call it Rahu. But you could say it's the same thing. No problem. And it's also interesting to what Matt was discussing in the chat, and I think Ram as well. We were talking about this exact thing about Rahu and how he actually has a very strong relationship with the outer three. With Pluto, Pluto can clear him, so we know that. So Neptune can absorb or suck in, you could say, because it's like Dhumavati. She consumes the smoke of Ketu. And then, of course, you have Uranus, which is somewhat similar to Chinnamasta, who clears the dragon, clears Rahu completely from a birth chart. But she's a Virasic goddess, so mostly inaccessible to those on a Tantric Marga, even for very advanced, because you have to fulfill a certain archetype to get there. So that's why, I prefer Buddhism, because Buddhism is like, it gives you that emptiness, that non-duality, and that bodhicitta. So you can like aim your arrow for where you want to go. You can actually, penetrate the Sephira, penetrate the densities with your loving kindness and your non-duality. It's a perfectly great way to do it. So that's why I always bring it back to that. But I think the thing that Aethyrpunk would be interesting is like, okay, so we're saying the planets are minor archons only, but they're also of yourself, right? That's my whole point about Rahu. It's really about yourself. Like the dragon is about yourself. Like, who are you? What is your will? And what do you desire? So if Rahu's about desire and the planets are about desire and the planets are about aggregation, then wouldn't it be great if you cleared them? Wouldn't it be great if you didn't fear them? Wouldn't it be great if you were able to transmute and transform them? And I think that's maybe perhaps the most Aetherpunk thing to do. It's like, as I was talking about, like with Toby Chappell, it's like the thing I said, what he calls semi-urgy, the transformation of signs and symbols. Well, where do you transform signs and symbols? Not just sigil making. I know everybody goes there because everybody loves chaos magic, of course. Me too, of course. But I just mean sigil magic is sort of the lesser quality, because the higher quality is in your own consciousness. That's really where the transformation of signs and symbols should take place, in your perception, in your awareness, in your full will. So, of course, sigil making is also fun and all that stuff. And I highly, if you want to learn sigil making, by all means. But, I just think that that's an interesting way to think about it. So, I agree that we need to transform our understanding of the planets, understanding of astrology. I think that people should actually take more of my tantric view of the planets as being more, I'm using this word, but it doesn't perfectly encapsulate or articulate what I'm meaning, but it's close, is metaphorical, but it's not quite that. But I think people would be better served, maybe just in a pragmatic view, they would be better served to understand the planets in more of a metaphorical. That's why I like the mythological, the Puranic layer often, because I think it's actually cool, and I actually think it tells you how to conquer and clear those planets within the story itself. Yes, Joshua, please go ahead.
I'm glad you brought up the topic of sigils, because it was reminding me of how AI does struggle. AI does struggle to read things like signatures. And so they've brought handwriting back into schools now, because they become so reliant upon chat GPT and stuff to fraudulently produce work and whatnot. So they make them now handwrite and sign things. And I just think it's kind of funny, because an element of Aethyrpunk, you said something old, something new earlier. I think an element of it is almost a return to at least what works, as in terms of conservatism. Maybe we don't agree with all the other things that they're doing, but there are parts of it that are just like common sense, right? So I think that that might be another element to recognize here. But another thing that kind of come to my mind was, you mentioned secrets earlier, and I was thinking about words, and with the approach of this thing that is coming. There are no secrets. There is no encryption. There, so what ways do we have to communicate that can't be monitored or whatever? And ironically enough, it's memes, right? So I think graffiti on a train car, that's our memes. When we meme or whatever, that's like tagging a train. And so there's these types of things I think are ways of communicating that to the uninitiated, right? It's like, well, I don't know what that meme means, or whatever. But if you do, it's 1,000 words, right? And so I think one of the things we gotta maybe at least get used to in our head thinking is how to communicate without, Big Brother knowing, right? And so that's one of the things I did enjoy about Cicada 3301. It kind of taught about encryption and cryptography and how to communicate, in those ways. And they were kind of like training us in a way, right? Like, hey, you might want to know this stuff later. And but that's also very warfare like, right? That's very Aries. That's very hidden communications, very mercurial as well, right? And running messages. That used to be kind of how they did things back in the old days. Like you'd run messages and notes, right? So I just think that's an element too that should be thought about. Is like in this age of Aethyrpunk, like how we will be communicating in the future.
That is an incredible points, every single one, Joshua. I thought you raised really interesting questions. Communication. Obviously, we're code maxing, right? Like, what is this aeon, if not the aeon of the child? In a way, I've obviously formulated it a little differently, but yeah, it's similar. There's a parallel idea there. And so, absolutely, we're code maxing, and that's what we're doing. We're turning lightning into diamond, right? Aren't we? Thunder into diamond, Joshua. So, the reality is like, if we use technology, it's going to always be a little transparent. So, how do we rectify the archons? Well, I think you should rectify them in your mind. And then, there. And then you have to be discerning about what you say. Like, we lived through a really fun time. Like, I'm not going to lie, like 2016 till like now, I was never online in 2016. I wasn't even online in 2019 or 2020. I was only online in 2021. So I'm kind of a rarity among my generation. But I do think that, we lived through the meme wars, as they say, as like the old tunes say. It is what it is. And we had fun, right? We got to say retard, we got to use slurs, we got to be racist. Yeah, it was great, fun, hilarious. And now we are in like we're just in a new aeon. So we are adapting, a very Year of the Snake, just adapting to this new landscape. But I agree with you. There is like a baseline conservatism, and I'm not talking about conservatism as reflected in any particular party or even ideology per se, but I'm talking about like what do we need to do as humans to like kind of perpetuate ourselves? Well, you need to have kids. Kids do best in a marriage. It just is the truth. It's not a judgment. We're not puritanical, right? We're middle pillar. We're flexible. We understand. Like everybody, I fucked up in my life. I'm sure other people have. Okay. I'm not going to make grand judgment. But kids do better in a family. And that's what we need to. That's the aunt or the daughter. Is like you have to be in love. And like, how do we perpetuate in the future? That's through love. How do we perpetuate the knowledge in the future? It's through spaces like this. But we have to do it in love. And that's another way to sort of clear the archons. Because if they're going to listen to this, if like someone from the IDF or someone from like a Iranian Telegram group is going to like listen to this, like who knows? Probably not. But if they do, who the fuck cares? What did we say? All we said was magic's real, everything's speculative, and it's all the arc of lies. And that's it. So take control of your own mind. Yes, Matt, please go ahead.
This idea of people fearing not having privacy, it's something that interests me a lot, because when I hear about people talking about subtle planes, like more subtle planes than the ones we are, it's kind of like they give the impression that everything there is already like not filtered, kind of like you can read anyone's minds, right? So everything is already open. Think about like a kind of a Akashic record. If you can just go in there and dig, then yeah, what can you hide, really? So to me, it's like it's very utopian. Again, this idea of you shouldn't need to have things to hide in a way, but I also get how people see this as some kind of attack, because, well, some things you might don't want everyone to know. But I agree with Jin. Like, if you rectify this on your mind, then there's never a problem, because you can always also just speak in layers, like what Joshua was saying, right? Talking memes, like you can just imagine and speak in layers. So that's the thing. You don't need to be literal with everything. You can always find things to wander around and so on. But the main point that I wanted to bring up is when Joshua was talking about this handwriting. So people having to write again by hand because of AI and whatever. So think about, and we were also talking about like doing sigils. So think about sigils nowadays. You can make the most complex, crazy ones using something like a computer. You can go to any graphic designer software and just make it. But it won't have necessarily the same power than one that you do with paper and a pencil. Just simply because, again, chemical process. So when you are doing a sigil in a computer, you are using the mouse and you're using the keyboard, right? So you're doing things with your body that are different. That if you got a paper, you got to touch the paper, and you got a pencil with your hand. Again, it's different path work that you're doing, literally, because your mind is working differently. So it's an interesting idea to remember, like, okay, there are old ways of doing things and new ways, and it's not that one is necessarily the best, it's just that they are different. So you also, like Jin is saying, and I totally agree, you got to learn to adapt, right? So if nowadays I can, for example, I can use AI to generate an idea, or even just use the internet in general to give me ideas for the things that I want to create, but then I go and create them in the way that they bring the most value. So if we're talking sigils, I personally would recommend do it by hand, right? Just because it gives it more power. But so you can use both, right? And another thing that I don't see people talking about is when you talk about like age, like astrological ages changing. So a lot of people say, "Oh, okay, right, we're entering Aquarius age." But if you think about it as like a ward or like a universe map, if you put the universe in the map, then who would be the opposite now of the current age? So, for example, it would be Leo in this case, right? Aquarius and Leo, and you would have another sign in like the midheaven and on the bottom and so on, right? So those would also influence the current age. So you have to take everything into perspective when we're talking about cycles changing. So again, if you're talking about something new coming up, there's going to be its shadow. So if you're talking about like a new aeon and some kind of new environment and so on, there's going to be things that have to come, quote unquote, have to come from the past, because we already been through the age of Leo, for example, and just because the way the cycle works. So it has the polarities. So every sign has its polarity. So we got to work both. So if you're not aware of it, then you may be caught off guard, because something might happen and you're gonna be like, "Oh, what the fuck? Wouldn't expect this to happen, considering we are in this aeon." But no, you have also its shadow and the other correspondences, right? So it's a lot of things to take in mind. But I find it came to mind when Jin said and Joshua said again this idea of new and old.
That's the thing. It's the bride. It's like we're entering the fifth turning, really, because what is it? Where it's in perception. We're in perception to it. So it has to be the 5th. And hello, Brother Frenzy. Welcome. I'm so glad I added you to the lodge, and I'm so glad that you come. Honestly, it's great to have, like, some of the people I met through Dharma Twitter, it was incredible. Like, just, I honestly makes me really happy because I always feel like I toe such a fine line, and I try to be dharmic and like how I present and what I say and make sure it's like in accordance with Samaya vows and all of that. And it's really fucking hard sometimes. And like sometimes I don't even feel bodhicitta towards people because they make me so angry. Like there's so, I mean, you all know how I am. I'm very mercurial. So not to you really, but sometimes. Not really. But there are people I really dislike. But I have legitimate reasons. Like I could tell you logically why I don't like them. It wouldn't just be emotional. But you don't have to agree, of course, but I think it's interesting. And so, yeah, of course I don't like them. So, I'm not perfectly non-dual. That's the reality. It's like, that's what I like about I didn't title my show after this, just to be clear, but maybe in a like subconscious way I did, but it really wasn't to do with that. It's a lot more to do with the idea of Zhanghu and rivers and lakes from Wuxia literature. I've explained this a couple times, but the idea of the saint on the Kabbalistic tree and the saint's path, which is from Netzach to Yesod, it does speak to me because it's not exactly like the Christian idea of saints. And obviously I did grow up Catholic, so I'm pretty familiar with that idea. But it is in a way. There is something similar, maybe, and maybe it's just the difference between Christian Kabbalah and Jewish Kabbalah, and that's fine. But the idea is that you're constantly coming into rectification as a saint because you might foolishly believe yourself to be special and then need to be a little checked, right? You know, to get your ass kicked a couple times, and then you kind of like get yourself together, and you're like, okay, like I'm, not quite the magi I thought I was, and maybe that's actually useful. So I like that idea of the saint, not to be a martyr, but just because I think it's a useful thing to always think in terms of rectification, like how I'm going to resolve this paradox, especially if you've lived a life full of paradox, like many of us have. Like, what is a good way to resolve paradox is through practices of rectification, Vajrasattva, right? It's Buddha Day 2 days ago. So this whole period of time, this lunar phase that we're going through right now, is a perfect time to do rectification practices. If you want to do a Kabbalistic one, you could meditate on Yesod. You could meditate on the words of Yesod. You could meditate on the colors. You could also meditate on Hesed. Why do I say that? Because during periods of perceptual war, we could say perceptual war. So again, nothing ever happens, boys. We always win. But speculatively, of course. It's a good metaphor, maybe, to calm some of the ferocious words. I'm just saying for yourself, but perhaps maybe if you're good enough, you can purify the outer atmosphere as well. I'm not saying that's your goal. I'm just offering an idea. Not telling anyone what to do or magic or anything like that. I'm just saying if you want to meditate on Hesed, Hesed can actually bring a lot of things into rectification by itself. It's just a complicated sphere because people overcomplicate what it means. Because they want to try and get the most money or the most power or the most high honors or the most everything, because it can give you a lot of things because it's infinite in its potential. But you also have to like be very aware of where it begins and ends. And so at this point we can say, yeah, Hesed would be good. It would calm some of the fire of war, some of the rhetoric, some of the harsh words. But it doesn't, just meditating on Hesed is something I've learned very acutely, is that you also have to be aware of those negative qualities, maybe those klipas, those aggregations that you embody, and you can't just meditate on it and expect it all to be rectified. That's not really how it works. You have to make yourself the great work. You have to actually be aware, conscious in your will, in your full knowledge of like actions that you do, words that you speak. You'll see, I think some of you have actually noticed, but perhaps have not said anything, although I did tell Rom to say mean things to someone, but I digress. So I'm not perfect, but because I'm blocked, obviously. I would have done it myself. But yeah, you have to be aware of that, even online. And I think actually there is something very metaphysically implicative about online. I've started to think maybe that we should think of our phones more in like Matt kind of alluded to this, is like they're more of our wands, right? They're very aromatic, right? Like we said, Rahu Ketu. It's the black crystal with the smoky body. The smoky body is a software. It's like the spirit that doesn't exist in the physical. And the black cube is all that exists. But the black cube also requires that secret third thing, just like there are three expressions of Hod or Mercury, right? There's Mercury, Sirius A, and Sirius B. It's also why the colors are perhaps the most complicated and the least complicated in some ways, but definitely there's the most there's the most differences between systems and chronologies of Hod, but actually you can sort of understand them in the three world layer as Kabbalah describes. Now, that I don't prefer that personally, but I understand it. Oh yes, Joshua, please go ahead.
Hey, yeah, I was just going to ask. I was reminded of the paths, and we were talking about path working and things like that weeks prior. And it reminded me of this Chesed example and the others. But I was thinking, oh, okay, so if just like the trials are provided to you, so too are the opportunities to exercise the Sphero, right? And so I think rather than try to create them, that makes it a klipa, right? But if we on our walk or our path we encounter it, it's like another test or station, right? If we recognize what it is, we're like, oh, okay, this is the Chesed opportunity, and so we do that, right? And it reminded me too of a part in the Bible where, and it helped me understand this better just now, was that it tells you not to basically brag about your good deeds or something like that. Don't be somebody that like tells about the things. So there's a secret element there too that is very important, like doing God's work or something like that, I guess.
That's a really profound point, Joshua. And I think we even discussed this in the chat about like Aquinas, how like some of his ideas complicate some of the Protestant ideas of theosis and gnosis, because you have to have that secret third thing of work, right? Good works. And what are good works? But exactly what you said. It's to use discriminating awareness. That's the exact phrase we would use in Buddhism, discriminating awareness. But it's basically that dialectical relationship of Gevra and Hesed. So it's kind of like the push and the pull. But because Gevra and Hesed together are the perfect teacher, that's kind of why the Jesus or the Son figure is actually at Tiferet, because he's the perfect teacher, right? Like that's what Mary Magdalene calls him. She says, Rabboni. Like, why are you in front of me? And he says, well, I'm not quite your teacher, but I'm not him either. So interesting. I don't know. Maybe Joshua won't like my kind of Gnostic interpretation of John, but or maybe it's Luke, but that's okay. You guys know I'm a speculative Gnostic in my mind, if not in my heart. Dharma's for my heart, right? But speculative Gnostic in my mind for sure. Yes, Joshua, please go ahead.
Well, I can't refute or affirm either, but I do remember there is a verse. Maybe it is him. Maybe he's quoting the Old Testament as well, but he says, "Call no man father." But he does recognize his role. On the other hand, because there's another example with Peter, where Peter is the only one of the 12 disciples that actually recognizes his divinity. In other words, recognizes that he's the Son of God, because he asks him, "Who do people say I am?" right? And then they'll say this, that, and the other. And then he says, well, who do you think I am? And he says, well, I think you're the Christ, the Son of God. And he's like, well, because you are able to discern that, none of the others were able to. He therefore built his church upon him. Peter, meaning rock. And Peter is also in my opinion, it's analogous to the pineal gland, right? So it's like he had the perception or discernment, the ability to understand. So that might relate to like Bina or the deoccultation, like you were talking about earlier. His understanding was illuminated, at least in that moment, and that's the very definition of epiphany. Of course, is that instant illumination, right?
Absolutely, because what is it? It's a primordial tradition. I think that I'll say I'm a co-creator of that term with Solar, but not really. But we discussed it definitely, and I think primordial tradition is an interesting framing. It's like retelling a story of like if you want to call it Atlantis and like say like Matt was talking about, or you want to call it Hyperborea like I'm talking about, or you want to call it Hyperborea like Joshua often discusses. I think that I don't think any of those is quite wrong. So I like all of that, but I think it's all speaking to something that has come before. Like I'm not a Mormon, so like this is not. I'm just quoting Battlestar Galactica, so just give me a fucking break, okay, guys? But everything that's happened before will happen again, right? If you've seen Battlestar Galactica, that's like basically the whole. That's the whole series. Like that's exactly the whole series. Like they live out a scripture. They live out a scripture. But then there's a moment where they realize we actually don't have to live out of scripture. And something really interesting about that is the Cylons then start to live out their scripture. It's the same scripture, but it's a different sort of version or view of it, a more harsh, more puritanical view. And they're saying, now, actually, we're going to take control of the Leela. We're going to take control of the narrative, and we're going to make the humans live out our version of the play. And then what ends up happening is they actually synthesize together, meaning that they go off together, some of them at least, and to find the Earth or the world. And spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend everybody watch it. It's an amazing series and filmed in Vancouver. So beautiful as well. But okay, so they find the world. But what is the world? The world is a wreckage of nuclear devastation. Well, that's what the implication is. So, some of you know, I don't necessarily believe in atomic weapons per se. I do think there's some kind of insane energetic thing that happens. I think of it in more magical terms, perhaps. I think that Ram will know, like Kumara, the Skanda, Murugan, Kartikya, he can be associated with nuclear fission. Fission, not fusion. Or is it fusion? It's fusion, excuse me. Fusion. Sorry. He can be associated with nuclear fusion. Now, so I think that there's something that they're doing that perhaps they shouldn't do. But if you are an, we'll call them media internet archivist of any good quality, you will notice that it's actually very difficult to find photography, archival photography of nuclear explosions. So I'm just saying that I'm not quite sure what that is. I agree it's devastating, powerful, insane technology, whatever it is. If it's magic, it's still technology. And if it's technology, that still can be described as magic, of course. But I'm not quite sure that it's really well understood, especially by us. It's very occulted to the mass, I would say. Some people would say they understand the Tiferatic qualities, like the institutional scientific qualities of things, but you can't really, Tiferet has one path to Bina, but you need other things. Other things have to happen before you really are able to conquer it, is the truth. So, yes, Joshua, please go ahead.
Concerning why, and this is just speculation, I don't know this for a fact, but maybe one of the reasons there's no photography of it is because the gamma radiation probably just, the film is ruined probably by that, I would imagine. So unless they had found a way around that, I could see why they wouldn't be able to film it. That's just speculation, like I said.
Absolutely, and it's not that I have a fixed belief. I guess that's how I should have framed it. Is that I'm not particularly fixed in like any idea of what they are. And so, but I 100% agree, Joshua, and I think that's a very fair point. I would say that during the 70s, the French were supposedly doing all those nuclear testing at the Bikini Atoll. And even that is very difficult to find archival photography. And we know that they were supposedly filming from the BBC in a helicopter, like live during the thing. So that there clearly exists some. So they obviously accounted for some of it, but I have a question about it. So I think that also goes back to the Aetherpunk thing, is like how we fuel the hyperspace kingdom. I'll leave it to you. And Joshua, please go ahead.
Yeah, I thought of a question, perhaps. You mentioned that figure was associated with fission, and I couldn't help but every time I hear the word nuclear, I think of the nuclear family, right? And how the bonds between family members and the nuclear bonds, and I just think it's so strange how analogous they are, at least phonetically. And I was just wondering if maybe the figures you were mentioning, like if they had qualities of like family, hearth, home, are they like considered conservative in nature or anything like that? Maybe, because I was just wondering if maybe there was a parallel there.
To which characters? I apologize, Joshua.
I couldn't understand the name, but I think you said he was associated with fission or like.
Oh yes, Kartikya. So yes, I apologize. I don't know why I didn't understand. Okay, I'm back. I guess I had a moment. So yes, he is the son. So he's very Christ-like. Rom knows. We've discussed this many times. Like, yeah, there's something very Christ-like. Same, very similar. I'm not saying they're exactly the same. I'm just saying they're parallel figures. They're both the son. Now, the Theosophists did borrow the term Kumara, Madame Blavatsky and all of that. And obviously, this ties into Kalki Prana. They conflated the Kumara with Vishnu. Vishnu's not the son, he doesn't really have parents in that way. So he's not the Kumara. The Kumara is Kartikya, who is the son of Shiva, who corresponds to, in my opinion, Rudra or Ihova, and the Shakti, the Shekinah, right? The Uma, the Queen of Heaven. That's exactly who she is. So they have multiple children. Obviously, the daughter is one, and she's secret, hidden, special, very special in Tantra. And they also have Ganapati, although Ganapati was never begotten by the father. He's composed of his seed, yes, because Shakti is an excellent Tantrika in her own right, but he is not begotten by sex. He's begotten by an alchemical working that she does to create him. So, but with her juices and his seed as well. So, okay, so all that is in him, but it's not. It's not the usual way. It's not the typical method. It's more of like a turkey baster, okay? And then you have Kartikya, who is their son. He's begotten by them in the typical way, the one time, okay? And so he actually has more children than that, but that's the really important amount, is the three. So yeah, so basically Shiva wants him to use Tantra, use the left hand path, to sort of undo the ruling order, you could say, cast off the husks into the carnal fire. That would be a Rudra like thing to do. However, Kartikya, he sort of became sublimated, obviously, by the Brahmanization in India. So, like a Sanskritization, a Vaishnavification, where people were worshiping Krishna. They're very into Krishna, right? Like, or Vishnu, just Vishnu in general, but Krishna is the most important avatar. And as we've discussed, and I think you were even in some of those spaces, Joshua, is that like Krishna and Kumara actually have different ontological positionalities. And if you were going to compare them to the tree, you would say that Krishna is Bina, or one of the densities there, and that Kartikeya could be Gevra, but it can also be Tiferet, excuse me. Just like Christ can be Hesed and also Tiferet as well. But actually, it's really the dialectical relationship. So I'm saying that he's one, but it's really they're both. It's like neither nor, and then they're meeting in the middle. It's like Vajra, like a figure eight, like the lightning. The path is clear, and it's just like, like it's an atomic reaction kind of. And that's exactly what it is. It's the upward facing triangle and the downward facing triangle, and what arises in the middle. Besides synthesis, it's the sun. But we have acknowledged as just like a general idea, speculative, of course. So of course, none of you have to agree, or all of you can agree. But I'll just say, for me, I think of it as the resolution of the sun is with the daughter, the 4 and the 5, rectified together in the 9. So that's how I work it out. So it makes sense for me. I think I can argue why those things are, and I think Tantra resolves it. And I think Tantra also, Buddhism at least, Buddhist Tantra, resolves the paradox of Babylon, like the Babylon workings, where they're exactly like I've been talking about on my timeline, is like the idea of like our preconceptions, like pushing our preconceptions onto what these things that are actually ineffable are. Even the act of anthropomorphizing them, it can be very useful, but it also can be a husk or an aggregation or a klipa in and of itself. Yes, Joshua, please go ahead.
Thank you for providing that explanation. It reminded me of Zeus and how he had Demeter, or not Demeter, Artemis and Apollo, which is the sun and moon. And he would basically, and this might even be where the Santa Claus sitting on the lap thing comes from, because that happens in the story where she kind of sits on his lap basically, and he just gives her whatever she wants, right? She just has to ask, right? And then she has a silver bow, well, that never misses, right? But then Apollo, he's given an arrow of destruction. And it reminded me, like you said, like getting rid of all the klipas and stuff. And his job in this role was to basically war with giants, cleanse the earth, execute judgment, so on and so forth. And that is very Vajra-like in a way too, but the open kind, right? Not the peaceful kind. But the two combined, however, would be bow and arrow, right? So it kind of, that whole, all that he was talking about, just that came to mind. Can't fully articulate it though.
I totally get you. We're speaking the same language. So obviously Kurakula, the Buddhist Dakini goddess, she fits that archetype perfectly, because what is she doing? She stands on both her right and left foot on a corpse, which is called the Mara of Lust, the Klesha Mara, of the poison Mara, and she is shooting her bow and arrow on path 22. And well, that's speculatively, but yeah, I think that makes sense. And so that's what it kind of like the Aeon of the Daughter is. It's like that. It's like the Phoenix Force, Jean Grey, kind of, but not really, because she's in rectification with the sun. Complement, right? The sun and the moon together. Mary Magdalene and Jesus, if you want to use that cosmology, totally fine. But yeah, that's what it's really referring to. It's like how both of them come together, because we just came out of the Aeon of the Sun. There's nothing wrong with the Aeon of the Sun, right? We're not going to go in extremes of like saying things are good or evil. We're beyond that. We're post conceptual. I mean, seriously, like we've all heard all that, we've watched, like all the whole point of these series is that we kind of have a common language of media, we have a common language of magic, and we have a common kind of like traditional religious core, whether we express it in Tantra or Kabbalah. We kind of speak the same language, but we've also learned to code switch with each other and like use metaphors that the other will understand better. Like, because Joshua has a more Christian orientation, I find myself using more Christian models or more Christian metaphors. There's nothing wrong with that. That's good. You should learn to code switch. We should all learn to speak the language of Hapaboria, which is what? It's like a Creole, but it's not Creole in that it's broken English or mixed English. It's understanding each other in like a subtle way. That's really Aethyrpunk Creole, or the language of Aethyrpunk. It would be like that psychic vibes. But it's not just the vibes of preconception. Like, do you not like someone because you don't like them? Or is it just a feeling? Our feelings often lie. I'm telling you the truth because I'm good at Yesod. I'm just going to tell you. I'm not saying I've conquered it or anything. I haven't. I'm just saying that I feel stronger there. So I'm just going to give some advice, maybe we'll say. Just because you think something does not make it true. But yes, truth also arises in our own mind, especially relative truth. So sometimes you have to push forward despite your misgivings. And not to put you on the spot, Joshua, but we had a rocky start, but you know what? We've decided to move forward and forge a friendship. So it's what does that even mean? You don't like someone because of vibes? I've learned that that's largely bullshit because I'm always wrong anyway. Okay, Matt, please go ahead.
I just want to quickly expand on that idea. Linking it back to the concept of being able to read everyone's minds. Imagine a world where you literally have no privacy in the way that anyone could read what you're thinking. Then a bunch of bullshit would be cleared, because a lot of the times when we have problems with people is because we are creating the problem on our own heads before it actually happens, and then we live with the problem in our heads, and then we act in accordance to the problem we think we have, and then we create the problem. So it's actually very crazy, because sometimes I'll get myself thinking, I don't know, maybe this person or maybe that project or whatever shouldn't, be there anymore. And sure, sometimes you can be right. Let's say you can guess or intuit that, yeah, sure, you shouldn't be there anymore. But a lot of the times we are just coping or creating excuses, rationalizing things to try and make sense of our own perception. So maybe someone will treat you in a way, and then you would think that they disrespected me or whatever, but it could be that they didn't meant that, or they didn't even do this. It's just you in your head. And by the way, not all thoughts and feelings you have are yours. But this then becomes too complex, right? But let's assume they are for a second. They can be illusions as well. They can be not the whole view. So it's all about perspective. Again, we come back to the beginning, right? Jin was also talking about this. It's all about perspective. So sometimes just try to place yourself in a different perspective and see, what does the situation looks like from here? Okay, it actually doesn't look that bad. Or, yeah, it still looks bad. So, okay, then you can move forward and make decisions, right? Again, that's why it's interesting to use both columns and arrive in synthesis in the middle. You got to be lenient and give mercy to others, and listen to them, and you're gonna be severe when you need to be severe. You're gonna think about yourself first when the time is right, and you come back into synthesis in the middle. Otherwise, again, you can be too merciful and get run over by other people, or too severe and nobody can work with you because you're just too hard. So you gotta, again, always adapt to both situations.
So that's really what the Aethyrpunk future would be. It would be about mixing both pillars. So it would be about trial and error, because that would be about bringing ideas into form, right? We don't know exactly what ideas will work. Even the greatest mage doesn't always know the end results of his creation, no matter how much we know our own will, or how much foresight or knowledge we even have, or how much prayoga, how much potency we give to the work. You never know where you're going to really end up. That's part of what makes magic dangerous. That's just the truth. That's really the truth. Is that the fission or the fusion or the alchemical reaction, obviously metaphorical, that happens. There's part of it that's very uncontrollable. We talked a lot about this heatless fire and transforming. Rom loves this, the black flame alchemy. Yeah, that's real. That's transforming your desires into something else. I like the Dharmic, I like how Dharma resolves that personally. And they, you resolve your desire by what? You transform your mind. Transform your mind, and so you can bring it into a place of like emptiness and awareness at the same time in most cases. Now, nobody's perfect, but again, if you're like on the saint's path, maybe that's something that you want to try. Like Matt was saying, like you always bring it into synthesis. So, but in bringing into synthesis, but also that has the potential to go out of control. So you have to kind of rectify between Tiferet and Yesod. You have to like kind of get in touch with the sort of like the groundedness, the root of your consciousness, but then you also have to look higher. That's why I love the metaphor of the tree, not because it's a metaphor, because it's also real. As we're saying, like the whole thing is like, I think you can only really trace it to 500 BC. Of course, I would love the idea of some speculative Atlantis or Hyperborean like origin. Like I just don't know. But I think you all know this. My theory is that it is like a Central Asian sort of like not shamanism, like a high culture religion that's not shamanism, but shamanism is sort of the degradation or what happened later. So then, the tree got passed down from there, and then it became what it became, and there were different points of synthesis, different points where it came back together. And that's what all modern magicians really have been interested in, whether they admit it or not, are these points of synthesis, of texts, of ideas, of techniques, of methods, of methodologies. But they've forgotten many important points, because that can happen. That can happen in synthesis, is that things become over effulgent. So people always liken this to your ego. And yes, part of that is your ego. But sometimes you just forget. It just, things go by the wayside because it's such a potent act. So there are parts that are actually important, maybe decoherent, maybe in the pink ray, maybe in that subtlety that you've totally forgotten about, that are really important to how you even arrived there. Right? So you have to bring those things into synthesis, bring those things into rectification. That's what makes the changes from the Aeon of the Sun, who's about what? Synthesis, resolution of the father and the mother. But even in the Puranic example, like for Joshua, Kartikya doesn't actually use Tantra for that. He actually casts the Tantras into the supernal ocean, and they are swallowed by a giant whale, which I've always many times said is like Jonah and the whale. And so the tantras, the left-handed path texts, were swimming around the ocean for 800 years, they say. And so yeah, so basically, and then a sage got swallowed, he by the whale, and then he read the tantras in the whale's stomach, and then he was able to like fly out of the whale's mouth on a cloud, and then all that. But anyways, the point is like he did not do the will of the father or the mother. That was kind of the sin in like, so the North Indians kind of were like, well, we're going to forget you because you didn't adhere to them, even though they're not Shivites. Again, lending to the confusion of modern Indian religion, because it's really, they're not following the Puranas, they're kind of following their own thing, their own kind of mixture, synthesis, right? And so that's a lot of what we see too with ideas, because ideologies are just like religions, right? Is that they come into conflict and in synthesis, because there is also synthesis that happens in conflict. I think that's a really good metaphor for what we're seeing right now. And yes, I did see your hand up. I'm sorry, Joshua. Please go ahead.
Oh, it must have been glitching. Sorry.
Oh, no, not at all. I felt bad because I was like, your hand went up, and I was like, oh, I talked for like another minute, and I was like, oh, well. Okay, so at least it glitched. That's not good, but I'm happy to hear that. I guess that's a good place that we could close. What do you guys think? Should we talk a little bit about so we talked about nuclear. We talked about maybe fission and fusion, magical technologies, using them in your will, in accordance with your will, and in your full knowledge, and with bodhicitta. We've talked about being flexible in the new aeon, flexible in the year of the snake, especially. Sort of the broad outline of the aesthetics of Aethyrpunk. We also talked a little bit about, we didn't really talk about the architecture, so I know maybe we'll end on that. Is for that'll be our sort of point of entry for next week, is we will talk about like building, because we talked a lot about that, like in the sense of We talked a lot about like the future is what you build of it, the present is what you make of it, right? So maybe next week we will talk about like the architecture, and we can get into some magical architecture. And we can talk about temple architecture and how we envision that for the future. Because temple architecture, as Ron will know, is very linked to the body. Everybody will know this from these spaces, right? It's either the body of God or the body of Christ, or if that's the God, or it's your body, or it's Shiva's body, or whatever it is, okay? So it can be all of those things. And of course, the earth is what? The earth is the goddess. It's her fallen, her 51 pieces that fell to earth. So we live on the nipple. that's really what they call it. So that's Mount Meru, right? So yeah, that's where we at. So I guess, yeah, we'll call it here. Next week, architecture, and we'll talk a little bit more about anime and video games. And Joshua, you're continuously surprised, but I tell you all the time, I'm a true weeb. I like like anime. People don't even know my full knowledge on anime or Shaw Brothers films. I have like so many weird autistic, we'll call them, like little niche interests. It's like people would be really surprised. Okay, Matt, sorry, go ahead.
No worries. I just want to say that if we're talking about architecture next week, then it would be probably nice again to mention the archaeometer. Like I shared the thing on the spaces, on like the chat of the spaces. Like you don't have about the churches. They do some analysis of churches using the archaeometer, but I showed the vases that they do, which is also very cool. Like you can see again a note that a vase would play, right? And then you don't have to stop at a note. You can see the whole, let's say, the chords and the whole like music that a place would sing, or that the colors that would they would compare to, and then obviously then the astrological signs and so on and so forth. So I think that would be very freaking cool. Let's see how it goes next week.
Amazing. Thank you, Matt. Hi, Andre. We are, so I brought you up because we're in the like last of whatever. Well, I mean, you can go for as long as you want, but like we're pretty much like, we touched on a lot of the themes of the night. So I figured, why not? If you want to come up and ask questions or talk, that's fine.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, I won't make it super long. I think you guys would appreciate this question possibly. Personally, I'm a musician. I don't know. You don't really have to be a musician to answer it, as long as you're a Kabbalist, and you guys are. So, if you guys have a music background, maybe this would be better, but it doesn't really matter. My question to you regarding music and Kabbalah is, I'm a songwriter, and I've been considering on, I use time signatures, or I have an idea of how to use time signatures to, encapsulate maybe certain Sephira, but I know that, or Sephirot, however you say it. But my main question had to do with basically, the notes being representative of different Sephirots, or maybe even the paths or something like that. And I was curious how you guys think that it could be laid out within the context of music. And I'll just lay a couple different ideas I have in terms of the note writing, because I come from it with improvisation in a lot of sorts, but the only way I can see myself incorporating it within the actual note structure would be through key changes, because through a key change, say if F, we're in the key of F, like you said, I think that is the heart chakra, like you guys mentioned before. So if I was in the key of F and then I switched it to some other key, maybe it represents mercy or Yesod or something like that, then it could kind of shift to that modality. So I was thinking about approaching it from that angle. The only problem is, I think if you're analyzing it note by note, that's where it gets a little bit too hectic, because there's so many notes within a song. So to articulate each note millisecond by millisecond, oh, we're going to Yesod, the Malkuth, to this, that. I feel like it gets a little overwhelming. So I'm trying to figure out a way to incorporate this stuff more into my music. So I see you guys already got some answers. I'm loving it. What you guys got?
Okay, both of the boys, I'll let you guys go. The prince retires. Okay, Matt and Joshua, whatever order.
I have a short comment because I'm not actually a musician, but I do have what I think might be a useful tip. Look for what's called the monochord mundi, otherwise known as the world chord, and this connects also to the music of the spheres. But you might be able to find some inspiration there. There's also they each occupy spheres of orbit, of course, as well, and where those kind of interact, you can kind of sometimes see the notes having their overlap, and so I know we don't have, it may not be a perfect 8 planets, but you can kind of almost map it to the octave in that sense, right? But also, I wanted to make the point that in my opinion, just as you said that, the periodic table of elements also came to mind, and how it kind of operates in the same octave manner like music does. And when you mentioned the heart chakra in the middle, what came to my mind was in Masonry, we have the G, right, which a lot of people speculate is generative, right? But I think personally it also represents the chord, the monochord mundi. The word of God spoke everything into existence, right? So maybe it was on the G note. I don't know, but that's just the thoughts I wanted to share.
Oh, thank you for that. I just wanted to clarify one thing. I got the monochord thing, but you said some weird word that was the second word. Maybe you could send that in the chat or something, because I'm not sure if I would be able to type it. I don't know if maybe I misheard it or something, but
Mundi, M-U-N-D-I, just a word for
I got that one, but there's something else that you said after that. Like you said, you can incorporate the monochord mundi, and then you said something after that you could incorporate. But maybe I misheard it.
I'll have to reflect.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, maybe I'll re-listen to the space maybe. But thank you though. I'll definitely check that out. I appreciate it. What's up, Matt?
Yeah, well, one thing you can do is, I was talking about it already, the archeometer. So they tried making some correlations within the the alphabets. So the Hebrew one, the Sanskrit one, and so on. So if you can connect with the alphabets, you can connect with the paths. And if you can connect with the paths, you can connect with the spheres. But honestly, it's very interchangeable. For example, you could say that the C note would be Kether or Malchut if you're going from bottom up or top down, doesn't matter. And then the next ones would follow, right? So for example, you could say Kether is C, then Chochmah is D, then E, Binah, and so on, like on the lightning path. And you would probably use the middle ones like Da'at, Tiferet, and Yesod as intervals. So then you have 8, right, from Kether to Malchut. So Kether would be C note, Malchut would be the other octave of C note as well, and vice versa, right? If you want to start from Malchut. Another idea is if you have 12, at least in Western music, you have 12 semitones. You can obviously relate them to astrology very easily. You could say that the first note that is usually used, again, the C note, is Aries, and then you go from that, and from there, connecting all the 12 semitones. And then that makes some interesting ideas, because again, then you would have Libra and Aries, which are opposite signs, being tritones to one another. So then again, they kind of relate similarly in the geometry of things, right? But it really comes down to how you want to play it, because I'm actually going through this challenge as well, because I want to make an app that you can type your name or whatever, really, and then you can see which colors your name produces and which sounds. Kind of like, imagine you make a sound with your name, but then I'm getting to the challenge of, should each letter be a note, or should the first letter define the tone, and then like the other ones are going to be the scales. So like if the second word, let's say it's Mateos, like the A is like the first, so it should be the first scale of the tone of M, and so on and so forth. So you can play around in so many different ways that eventually, I think if you're doing songwriting, you shouldn't have this in mind necessarily, maybe to like begin the song, but I think it should be more right brain activity, not left brain, like trying to connect all the dots. But it's really cool to read. Like if you want to read a music, like someone else's music, and see, okay, what is the music talking about, and so on, and see their state of mind, then you can use the associations to understand. And I think that's very productive. But for creating, I don't know, I'm feeling it's hard as hell, like because there's just so many ways you can do it, and they all work, right? It's because we are talking about 12 semitones in Western music, but you can use microtones, so you'd have even more, right? So it really depends. Or you could work just with the major scale, for example, or different scales, and then you don't necessarily need the 12 semitones. You can use just the octaves within those tones, and so on. So it's many different ways you can play.
Man, I'm loving your answer, man. And yeah, when you throw the microtones in there, that throws a whole monkey wrench in that situation. And I'm sorry, I know you guys got to close. I'll just leave it one more thing, or unless you got something to say. Like,
I'll throw something in there for you, Andre. Is that there's an 11th century saint named Saint Hildegard of Bingen, and she actually, I'm sure Matt knows, is that she actually wrote about this question. She didn't really phrase it in terms of Sephira, but she understood. Like if you look at the drawings, their spheres, their colors, their densities, she posited that the notes actually were the densities. And so I kind of like that model. I think that might be a little easier. That might help resolve some of the paradox. I don't know, Matt. If it doesn't, I'm sorry, but I don't know. Maybe it can. Maybe it can generate an idea. But I think that Tantra resolves this by saying music actually arises at Tiferet, because it arises in both your discriminating awareness, your Gevra, as well as your like creative other brain. So it's the tide and the fire coming together, right? It's the forces coming together, and then they create something. So the synthesis is like music. That's how Tantra says, obviously. And the goddess who Matangi, obviously, she's peridot green, very much like the dragon, and so she holds a sitar. So she's not the production of music per se. She's the composition, the ritual grammar, the syntax, the way it's ordered, the way it's chronological, the way time is like time markers. I heard you say that, Andre. So that's kind of what she does. She changes the chronologies to make them into a spell, into a working. So that's another way, is like there's like everything in music is Kabbalistic. Everything in music is magic, metaphysical. Everything in music is magical. It's like, but do you bring it into your, like, how much do you bring into your will? How much do you bring into traditional knowledge? Like, it's also experimental, right? Because you could say music itself is like just a pure expression. It's kind of like Hode-like in a way, just like a pure expression, meaningless by itself, perhaps. Maybe something higher, but just in its general, just like people singing in a village, okay? That's like a very sort of Hode, Malkuth, Yesod kind of thing. Maybe of a singer. Then it becomes a little more Yesod, like not infamous, right? Not like worldwide famous. That's obviously more Tiferatic. It's interesting, right? A lot of celebrities are said to embody those beast-like qualities. Well, the beast-like qualities arises at Tiferet, that very egoic or Rahu consciousness. So I think that's kind of an interesting idea. I don't know, Andre, but I thought I'd offer that.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I think you guys definitely shed a lot of light on this stuff. It's just, yeah, I feel like there's certain frameworks that are, because music is such a pure expression form, that it's almost like, do you really want to like overthink it and incorporate these elements into it, and how much will it really have an effect on it in the end? So but when I feel like when it comes to time signatures, polyrhythms or polymeters, there is like like that. I feel like that is a pure effect, pure energy. Whether you're going into like a 7/8, like a lot of like Tool's latest album was full 7/8, so maybe that's incorporating that Netsock intelligence or something. I could be wrong there, or I don't even know what 4/4 would be. Maybe 4/4 would be chested, but maybe that's Hod too. I guess it depends on how you look at it or how you quantify those numbers. But like my thing is like I feel like I have to have some sort of simple system because when there's so many elements at play, it kind of makes it a little bit overwhelming, if you know what I mean.
So Matt is going to cringe. He's going to go, that's so cringing. But I for the numbers part, I would say okay, 44 is a special number, but yes, so Hesed. But you can also say Hod, and that's perfectly fine. Exactly like what you said, Andre, because the spark of Hod is what the heart of Hesed. So there's a dialectical relationship between Hod and Hesed right there. Okay. So that's why. So it's and also Hesed is the multiplicity. It's the expression of doubling, right? That's what you're doing. You're taking the 4 and you're doubling it. Interestingly enough, a 4, or at least the alchemical symbol for Jupiter, maybe not a 4, but an alchemical symbol for Jupiter, when you double it as a reflection in the water, it becomes what? It becomes Saturn. It's kind of interesting. So it's kind of the perception in time. So it's what you make of it. I think there's something to be said where you're a little free flow, like a little jazz like, where you kind of just let the pink ray, you could say, take you where you want to go. But then you also use that like turquoise, like green blue, because it's a mixture of your will and loving kindness at the same time. So you're mixing it together and you're saying, okay, I'm gonna take it somewhere. But maybe in the sort of the working, it's like you're taking it somewhere and it's taking you somewhere. It's kind of co-creative. I think that's kind of an interesting way to think of it.
Yeah, dude, I like it, and you kind of made me think too. Like, what if I think one way that may be a good way to start it off is to like say if you made a 10-song album and every song represents a different Sephiro, or you can make a 22-song album and each one can be a different path. And I feel like once you get to the end of that, maybe you'll have a better understanding of that feeling, and then you could kind of incorporate them together, or like different paths, like the 12th path to the 22nd path, or something like that. Combine those different energies. I'm just brainstorming, but I'm loving what you guys are saying. Maybe we could do a space on this sometime.
Absolutely. I'm not a music person, but as I have said, there's a musical, I guess, very millennial, like there is a soundtrack to every space. So the Aeon of the Daughter was breakcore. Welcome to Hyperborea is lo-fi hip hop, and then Aetherpunk is rock and roll. So I kind of like that. It's it's like I guess it is the backdrop to our world. It's very esoteric in a way. It's kind of the vibes of the world. Like, what is the vibe? That's the vibe. So I agree with you, Andre. I think that that's what it is. You have to treat it like it's a synthetic process. You have to treat it alchemically. So you're bringing it into synthesis. It doesn't mean synthesis is like every little piece that you control. It means synthesis means that you're bringing all these pieces together and you're going to see what you get from it. So it's all about like experimenting. I love the idea of doing a 10 or even 11, uh, track album. I think that's a great base. And then, like you said, maybe your next album is 22. Then you're doing the paths. And then the next one, the third one is like the integration, like mixing paths with Sephira. And then the next idea is to maybe just explore one Sephira. And I think you can look at a lot of people's discography and see that they did just that. Just laid it out just like that. Their first album was 10 or 11. Their next one was more, but it's clearly like a path working album. And then they do a Sephira. You can always look at album covers to see. It's a very good indicator for that. So I'll just say that. Yes, Joshua, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I was just going to suggest if you could name your album The Fool's Journey or something like that. But I think I remembered the word maybe I said earlier. Was it periodic table of elements? and I didn't know if that was it or not, but that was the other thing I was mentioning. So
Yeah, that I'm not sure. I think I might have just like misheard something, but I'll re-listen and I'll let you know. But yeah, thank you guys for all the suggestions. You guys blew the can off my creativity right there. And great space, by the way. I've really enjoyed listening to y'all.
Well, thank you, Andre, and thank you for coming up. Obviously, we only let Logi speak. You're a Logi, so thank you very much. We appreciate it. I hope that you coming up gives courage to Ram and maybe even Shakti, or any of the other Dakinis, Mookie, or Bullbray Free. They're always anyone's from the lodge is always welcome to speak. That's kind of always been our rule. During the series, usually what we do is we'll just do it like this, where we do it at the end, I think. But during Friday night Gnostic Mass, it's much more free for all. But if you're suggesting a music space, then absolutely we will do a music space, and I will credit you, Andre, for generating that kind of like idea. I know Ram will appreciate it, so we'll figure out if we want it in the Aethyrpunk, or we want it just as Welcome to Hyperborea, or we want it just as a Friday night Gnostic Mass. We'll just something we can think about. But yeah, we'll definitely do one, and that'll be really cool. And I think this was a great, really casual. Yeah, I know we didn't go as hardcore Kabbalah or Tantra as we usually do, but I think some really substantive ideas, like we always do. I always listen back and I'm like, yeah, like fuck yeah, I can't believe we said that. That was really interesting. I was like, we always do cool things, but I felt very casual tonight. I've been feeling very casual the last like 2 weeks, and so thank you guys for allowing me to sort of like explore the series in a different way. That's not so metaphysically and maybe intellectually intensive as sometimes we do. And I have had feedback from other people who said that we go in a very like intermediate to advanced level. So I appreciate that we have like that. We also do that. And I'm really proud of you all for like being able to understand and know like what we're talking about. And I know that that's a lot of the product of like hundreds, if not thousands of hours of the spaces. But I'm proud of that we all raised to a certain degree, and just through the spaces alone, and then also through outside study, right? But that you all, like we all did, we all raised in capacity, and we all raised in knowledge, even me, even the prince. I'm just kidding with that, but I'm serious in a way. Is that I raised you all. So initially, as you all know, I've joked about it many times. I raised you all to a degree. Not that you weren't at my degree, Matt or Joshua or Solar, but I was like, I need to raise them to a degree that I can just speak like total Kabbalah, like 100%. And so I was like, yeah, okay, we'll read the Dion Fortune book. I'll make sure that I include all the tantric parallels and allegories that I can to make sure that I can use both systems flexibly, right? And then we did that. We did the whole book. We did 11 Sephira, and we did like way more than that if you really think about it, because every Friday night we would also do like a crazy long speculative series where we use Kabbalah like all the time. So between the two of those things, I think I'm so happy that you guys are so smart. It's a little scary. It's a little like, whoa, what did we do? But it's of course interesting. It's really cool, and it is like that's generating like a positive vision for the world rather than the occultation. So, in many ways, you could consider what the Grey Lodge has been doing is sort of like redefining the klipas of certain things. I would say that that is definitely not a conscious part of my naming process or my conceptualization of the space, but it's definitely part of it. It's definitely like something that I do think about, like, what is the truth? And like how do we articulate it, and then also like talk to you like magicians, like my equals, like we all know the same things, and we're all aware of like subtle and gross forces in the world. So that's pretty much it. Is like that's why they're arcs, right? That's why every miniseries or the greater series, that's why they're always arcs, because like we build them of our own merit. The ideas are built of their own fucking merit. They sink or swim, sink or float, whatever. And they can also burn. We can also burn them down, right? Because we say it's speculative. So it kind of already exists in that nebulous pink ray of ideas anyway. But something true always in that pink formation. That's what's kind of makes pink special. So that's a great place to end it, I believe. Amazing space. I'll let Matt and Joshua, Dr. Birkin, close us out. Thank you so much, Andre. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Shakti, our Japanese zucchini. Thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate you. Lodge member from like day 2. I don't know, like forever. I'm very appreciative. Every space, really. You come and it doesn't happen without people in space. That's how it works. That's what a co-magic speculative Gnostic gospel is. It's like all of us in space in synthesis. Whether you speak or not speak, obviously, I would love you to speak, everyone to speak, but people speak who they, people come up who they want to, who wants to come up, and there's no pressure. So, Rom, thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was cool. I know we didn't really do all the anime and music stuff and all the architecture and technology stuff that you probably would have liked, but yes, there are 3 parts. So this is part 1, and there'll be a part next week, and there'll be a part the next week. So. What else? Amazing co-host that didn't come, but Solar is excusable. Monty probably just got stuck in traffic, to be honest. We'll just say that. That's okay. Happens, right? Okay, what else? Upcoming episodes for Threshold Saints, we have Mark Vallon on Evangelion. We have what else? Robbie Marks, Book of Enoch Part 3, with Nick, obviously, from Occult Rejects. And then we have Monty. We have Monty, 2 episodes from Mr. Montgomery Carlo. One is my old episode from Nice, which we discussed the anime Wicked City. So it's like an OVA or a anime movie from 1987. And then we also discussed the Hong Kong film of the same name, Wicked City, which is a little later on. And it's based on the same manga. So very cool. Great episode. Can't wait to clip off the music and use it for my show. And then we have Monty on Freerin, Journey's End. Very Aeon of the Daughter. And he even let me say it. He's like, Jin, do you think this series is? And I was like, yes. It is very Aeon of the Daughter. So amazing. Fortuitous coincidence, maybe you could say. And then, so we'll just say that for tonight. And thank you guys so much for coming. I feel like the lodge is so cool now. Like, not cool and like maybe not in like the millennial, like so a self-aware, ironic hipster way, but maybe just cool as in like, yeah, we have weathered many storms together. We have had our ups and downs, personal and private, and public and on the timeline. But we have just kind of like been like, yeah, actually, we'll just keep going. So that's what we're doing. We're keeping going. Warriors were as I said, go Magi Rangers. So because there is really no better metaphysical, our brother Dingbat did not come, but we can say very readily that Common Rider is probably one of the best metaphors for the adamantine sun or Seth. It's interesting. It does kind of fit, right? He transforms an adamantine in a green flash of red and blue and henching, right? All that. So yeah, he becomes the adamantine man. So, and also like that's part of like his hero's journey. He has this adamantine power, but he starts off every series as a bit of a R word, hard R. So, but then he transforms, right? That's the whole, every arc, every story, every series of Kamen Rider, he transforms. He actually grows. He starts as the prince. He starts in Hode, and he travels to Sephiroth. Sometimes he fucks up. just like everyone does. But he always ends up as kind of like, okay, I'm comfortable as common writer. I understand like who I am. So there is no better adamantine story, perhaps, in modern pop culture. That's definitely one of them. So we'll shout out that because that's also very Aeon of the Sun, so it's very complementary, obviously, to any Aeon of the Daughter work. And yeah, okay, Matt, please go ahead, and Joshua, please go ahead, and then I have like 4 more words, and then we'll end.
As always, amazing stuff. Thanks a lot for the co-hosts, especially Jin, who takes care of ordering everything with his Saturnian energy. You see, Saturn can be very good. And thanks, obviously, everyone who joined, who listened to, and who hopefully took some value from it. Again, like Jin always says, and I agree, it only happens in synthesis with other people. So we need other people for the thing to also be cool to keep doing, So the more you come, the more you give reactions and comment about it and let us know that you like or not like and so on. That helps us keep going. So I'm Matt Mora. Again, Kabbalah, Tarot, Astrology, anything magical, just follow me. I like talking about this kind of stuff. I am starting to come back to Twitter more to post because, as I already spoiled, I was working on some projects, namely this one are showing your names, sounds, and colors and so on, which is very cool. Also, for you that is listening and for someone that's listening and also happens to develop, I did a library, an open source library for esoteric calculations, things like gematria or numerology or astrology, tarot, and so on. Even like the 3 correspondences, they're not fixed. So it's not like you can have a software for that, but it helps starting somewhere, So also if you want to know what more about this, just again, follow me, send me a DM, I can explain. But it's all open source and free. And without further ado, then I guess Joshua.
Thank you, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. As Jin said, it's there's synthesis within the conflict, right? So I'm glad to be a part of that process, that we can all grow together and share ideas and learn how to communicate, right? Because regardless of what our background or religions are, we can actually discuss Kabbalah and these really fun topics. So this is my I look forward to this every week. It's like my favorite thing to do now as a hobby, I guess. But anyway, thanks so much for sharing time and space, particularly the space we're in now.
Wow, how to follow that up? Okay, so yeah, agree with everything. So good, Joshua. I'm trying to. You're like the star of the show every time now. Well, Matt's always burns bright. Joshua is like the uprising star, we could say. But no, I totally agree with you, Joshua. I think that conflict is okay. Space of decoherence. It's just like, how do we conflict? Like, even for me, I've really calmed down with the quote tweets. I think that's okay, and I think that I shouldn't probably make Rom be my foot soldier against the trans ass astrologers. But I digress. Um, so anyway, so I just think that yeah, I think the conflict's okay. It's like, how do we deal with it? Also, like, to know your boundaries is really good. Like, maybe that's very Saturnian of me to say, but I just think that probably at first, not with you, Joshua, or not with Matt, or not with anyone in our group currently, but I think in the past I had very bad boundary, like just like my availability and my also my needs, like Matt was talking about, like my need to kind of be liked sometimes. Like, I'm not really like that, but sometimes I guess I was feeling like a little after everything that happened, I just felt like a little out of sorts, I guess you could say, a little wild, out of control, a little chaotic. So I think that probably I looked for approval. And so I was trying to be too nice, but the reality is I'm not that nice, so I'm okay with that. I'm nice and I'm not nice. I think that is just a admission of like more of the certitude of who I am, I guess. So I'm okay with not being always the nice guy. Totally okay to be both the villain and the hero. So with that being said, yeah, Joshua, everything you said, great, love it, great. Obviously, we're going to continue. Hopefully, we're not just going to do the series that we're going to do, like in terms of the video game that you want to talk about. I actually have a lot of other ideas. As I said, I'm a true weeb. We can discuss many different series of video games. I'm totally up for it. I'm 100% game, in the most literal sense, and yeah. So. And that goes for anyone listening. If you have an anime series that you really want to discuss, if you have a video game series you really want to discuss, and you want to hear me, Schizo Kabbalah, on it, please, by all means, DM me, ask me. So, yeah.
And I do have a couple interesting conversation topics, but maybe I'll say it for next week, though.
No problem. Thank you, Andre. You can always tell us in chat as well, and yeah, we can always remix and decide how we want to, in the orders of which we address them. So
Absolutely. Sometimes I throw spaces too, so I'll shoot you all a link. Maybe you guys might stop by.
yeah, we always try and as much. I know that Joshua loves space. He'll definitely jump in, but like, yeah, we definitely, please send it to us. I try as much as possible to support everyone's project. Now, I'm not the best in sense that, like, my timeline is not like the people that I follow, or it's not even people that I even like necessarily. And yes, I do the my follower tab or following tab, but I don't really see people very often. So if you really want my attention, it's not because I have a huge account or anything. It's just because I legit don't see it, and I often am in my own zone. Like Matt knows this. I just kind of post in my own reality. So for me, you have to tag me, or you have to send it to me in DM. So if you want to tag me, you want me to retweet something, I'm more than happy to do that. Obviously, we're trying to be a little less inflammatory right now in this like current climate of things. So hopefully, nothing crazy, but obviously if you're my friend and my mutual, you can tolerate a certain level of crazy. So if you want me to retweet it, I'm more than happy to. Legit. Even if it's a little edgy. I like a little edgelord, so that's totally okay with me. Okay, so thank you so much, everybody. Thank you to Rom. Special shout out to John, who is now on, I believe, a meditation retreat. But he did do the artwork for one of the posters. He kind of retooled the font and the coloration, saturation, the light saturation, and he made it look really Art Deco. So he is the one who did the streamlined poster. So we're going to say extra thank you to him. And who else? I think that's it. I think that we shout out everybody, Monty, Solar. And so Monty was technically a co-host tonight. I didn't really ask him beforehand, but I was like, he comes, so just add him. He's like trustworthy on mic. He's like, I know he's a great podcaster, so I don't really worry about him. So I was like, okay, I'll just ask him. I'll just add him. It's great too, right? Because it's like, John and Solar both told me, like, we do need the lodge to try, and it's not necessarily that we want to be a huge thing. We don't want to be a huge thing. But I think it's good that we kind of expand a little bit and like have different ideas and discussions. And I think that's what I've appreciated about Andre, is that he actually earnestly asks questions, and we haven't really done that for a long time. So it's actually fun to sort of revisit those things and like see where we come together and where our current ideas are. Because as Matt said, the tree is constantly changing because we're constantly changing. So our ideas on certain things constantly change, like how our relationship with each other constantly is changing. It's constantly in flux, right? It's the aeon in flux. That's the whole idea. That's even very Year of the Snake is very flux, right? So we just got to be dancing on the carnogram. That's basically it. So, be flexible, be in love, go in the world with bodhicitta, go in the world with discernment, go in the world with higher knowledge. Go in the world with wisdom and understanding and synthesis and understanding what those things are. Don't go schizo, don't go sicko. But, this is like a pleasure world. So, live your life. But just recognize there are karmic implications for it. And that's really what even the paths of the Tree of Life really are. It's kind of talking about karma in like a more Jewish way. So obviously I prefer the Dharmic idea of karma. I think that's more the truth, if you want to call it that. So that's how I see the world. So that's obviously how I try and present the material. But you take it as you will. Thank you all for transcending time in space on an app called X, riding the dragon with us. This is the Grey Lodge plus Ultra presents Aethyrpunk Arc 5 Part 1. I'm Jin the Ninja. I host a show called Threshold Saints, Serial Experiments in Speculative Ontology. That's pretty good. I have to say, I thought that was quite clever when I wrote that. But yeah, thank you so much. Thank you to Matt Murrah. Thank you to Dr. William Burke and Joshua the Branch. Thank you to Shakti, Ram, and Andre for being the Nagas who held out the longest. It wasn't even that long of a space tonight, but I thought, I think it's really fun. I look forward to this so much, Joshua. I try and like hold it in and be like, yeah, Mr. Cool. I'm like so unaffected. But the reality is like it's actually meaningful. It's actually become meaningful. And I think it always was. And I think that that's what the tumult and everything that we all went through was about. It's like, does that define the contours of it? No. But what the shakeups that happen, they kind of give us the clarity, or at least they break up the aggregation so we can kind of see, yeah, it actually is meaningful. Actually, I started this not knowing what the fuck I was doing. And I was like, yeah, let's just see what happens. Like, that's what I think, Andre. It's like sometimes it's just about you just go with it. Sometimes you just have that impulse, that Rajasic feeling, and you're just like, yeah, I'm gonna fucking make something. Sometimes it's a fucking genius creation, and sometimes it's, sometimes it's not. So, with that being said, everybody have a very good night. Very happy Buddha Day. I know it's a few days past, but it is technically celebrated for several days, a week, or a whole lunar. It's kind of like a lunar cycle, so it's a few days. And thank you. And this was really fun, really great. I'm so glad we could do the Aethyrpunk series. I hope, Ram, that we brought some of those dreams true. I know we'll try and go a little more fantastical next week, and I'll try and think of things and maybe have some images that we can talk about and discuss, because I know that's always fun to do iconography and all that. So that's pretty much where we're at with that. And if you have video game suggestions that you think are Aethyrpunk and you want to send them to us, or send them to any of the hosts, or tell us in chat, please do. Anime, movies, whatever. Okay, so there you go. Thank you guys so much, and have a great night.